I'm the highest civilization in the universe. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 376, Saw Too Much. Mace stood not far away with a painful expression on his face. He looked at his broken spider leg and glared at Tanjing with a ferocious look. The muscles on his mouth and face kept twitching. Are you crazy? Mace roared angrily and looked at Tanjing with a fierce look. But at this moment, Tanjing seemed not to hear it. He looked at his fist wrapped in flames and pressed heavily on the ground, and his eyes kept trembling. Still can't attack him. Why? Tanjing whispered in his mouth, and his figure slowly stood up. Li Ming was also surprised to see this scene, but he was relieved in his heart. This further proved that those consciousness pills played a huge role. Thinking of this, Li Ming raised his head slightly and looked at the sky. Cottrell was angry, and his figure moved and leaped down from the air. With two light papa sounds, Cottrell landed in front of Mason McCall. He looked at Li Ming, then at Tanjing and said, "Tanjing, do you know what you are doing? Are you going to betray me?" Tanjing was startled when he heard this and quickly looked at Cottrell. His mouth slightly opened and he was about to say something loudly, but didn't open his mouth. He just said in a low voice, "No, no." The voice was very small, but Cottrell heard it very clearly. His eyes returned to Li Ming and said, "Then kill him." When Tanjing heard the order, his body turned to Li Ming, but when he looked at Li Ming's face, he couldn't move his hands, as if there was a subconscious in his mind that kept telling himself, "Don't do anything to him, don't do anything to him." Looking at Li Ming, Tanjing shook her head and said, I can't do anything." Cottrell was furious, his eyes turned sinister, and he suddenly raised his left hand and grabbed Tanjing in the air. Zzzz. A strange sound came from Tanjing's back, and suddenly red stripes spread from Tanjing's back. The stripes began to spread from the surface of her flesh, and in just a few seconds, the stripes spread to Tanjing's whole body. Her hands, exposed legs, and innocent face were all covered with stripes. The stripes were red and looked like lightning in the sky. As soon as they appeared, Tanjing groaned in pain and fell to the ground. Li Ming was shocked when he saw this. Even with his keen eyes, he couldn't see what ability Cottrell used, but when he turned his eyes to Tanjing lying on the ground, he immediately found something strange. With his discerning eyes, Li Ming had already seen the injuries on Tanjing's body. On the left side of Tanjing's back, directly opposite the heart, there appeared a red poison energy point, and all the stripes on the body were spread out from that point. All the places where the stripes reached were corroded by the poison energy. It was under the effect of the poison energy that Tanjing fell directly. Although the poison energy spread all over Tanjing's body in an instant, it was only on the surface of the body. The poison energy in the body was also spreading a little bit, but the speed was slower. But it was obvious that, if it spread like this, Tanjing would definitely die. Seeing this, Li Ming's eyes turned and looked at Cottrell. Cottrell was calm, as if it was just a common thing. The power of the death medicine. Li Ming whispered. Cottrell smiled lightly and said, "This is the end of betraying me." Humph. Li Ming snorted lightly, looked at Cottrell, then looked at Mason McCall behind him, and said, "Mayo, you can be so cruel as to kill Tanjing because she is a girl." Cottrell's eyes suddenly became solemn. After staring at Li Ming for a few seconds, he raised the corner of his mouth and said, "Your eyes are really annoying. Is it because you have seen too much?" Li Ming looked back at him and said. Cottrell regained his composure and said, "The more you see, the more dangerous it is. If you can see farther, maybe you can survive." Li Ming smiled slightly, took 2 steps forward to Tanjing's side, but looked at Mason McCall and said, "The one called Mace is your most successful experiment, transferring the human soul to the body of a wild beast. This is really an amazing experiment. So, there is McCall, a silicon-based life, and Tanjing, an aerospace civilization." Li Ming kept looking at the 3 people opposite. Hearing what Li Ming said, Mason McCall looked at each other in confusion. It was obvious that the 2 of them were also bewitched by Cottrell's words and fell to this point today, but they didn't know why. Li Ming continued, with Mace as a successful test subject, you began to prepare a container for your soul. McCall, a silicon-based life, and Tanjing, a space civilization, are indeed geniuses. After all, silicon-based life and space civilization are both rare. It's a pity that Tanjing is a woman, but you didn't want to waste this space civilization, so you cultivated her into your own combat power. Now she has lost her effect on you, so you killed her without hesitation. As he said this, Li Ming's eyes turned to the motionless body of Tanjing in front of him. After hearing what Li Ming said, Mace and McCall's emotions fluctuated a little. They looked at each other for a while, and then looked at Cottrell. But Cottrell just stared at Li Ming fiercely without saying a word. Li Ming raised his head, and looked at the other side, and continued, now it seems that McCall, who has a silicon-based life form, is your only choice to inherit the soul. McCall's body moved when he heard this, and his eyes turned slightly, looking at Cottrell. Not only McCall, but even Mace was a little hesitant at this moment. Li Ming, who saw the changes in the two people's moods clearly, and this was exactly what Li Ming wanted. Taking advantage of the other party's confusion, Li Ming's right hand suddenly grabbed down and picked up Tanjing on the ground by the waist. At the same time, he swung his left hand and threw out a metal ball. Seeing that Li Ming was about to run, Cottrell's eyes suddenly widened a little, and his right hand aimed at Li Ming and swung. Bang! A muffled sound was heard, and a fist-sized ball of transparent liquid flew out. Li Ming dodged it and continued to run deep into the street. Cottrell was furious. He glanced at Mace and McCall beside him and shouted, "What are you still standing there for? Chase him." The two men finally reacted, but just as they were about to chase him, the metal ball that Li Ming had thrown before he left rolled to the ground. Mace and McCall paused and turned their eyes to the metal ball, but both of them frowned, not knowing what it was. However, Cottrell's face changed drastically, and he blurted out, "Is this insect hole?" As soon as he finished speaking, the metal ball suddenly exploded with a bang, and dark mist gushed out instantly. In just a blink of an eye, more than a dozen buildings around were shrouded by it. The speed at which the black mist spread was really amazing. Not only Cottrell and others, but also Li Ming, did not expect that this thing was so powerful. Li Ming's figure was almost swallowed up by it in an instant. Wormholes are actually zergs on some special planets. Li Ming's understanding and cognition of them is the same. However, after Cottrell's death potion ability, a large number of zergs were controlled by it. Li Ming found some relevant information from Cottrell's brain and the death potion alchemy starbook. Cottrell first found a planet with alien worms, and then put his own medicine into the planet. When the alien worms were infected, they were made into capsules of wormholes. Judging from the task that Cottrell originally assigned to Brendan, the power of a wormhole is enough to destroy a planet with low-level civilization. Brendan's task is to place wormholes to quickly occupy the world of low-level civilization. After killing Brendan, Li Ming took away the star bag on his body, which naturally included the wormhole. If he wants to get away now, he might as well release the wormhole so that he can escape in the chaos. The alien worms in the wormhole are extremely cruel and are completely unconscious creatures. In their eyes, all other lives are enemies. The black fog spread quickly, spreading through the construction area like a plague and at an extremely fast speed. The already dark night, coupled with the cover of the black fog, made going deep into it feel like entering an absolutely dark night, and one could only move by relying on consciousness. Chapter 377, Erupting Insect Lair. Li Ming was in the fog at the moment, and everything was pitch black within his sight. The black fog only covered the ground and the area more than 10 meters above. At this time, he could get rid of it by flying into the air. Li Ming naturally sensed this through his mental power, but leaving the black fog at this time would be more dangerous than being in the black fog. The bottom of the high-rise building in the construction area had completely disappeared, leaving only billowing black smoke, but at the top of the construction area, the figure of the spider monster Mace was jumping around, looking around. In the higher altitude, Cottrell's face was extremely ugly, and he said to a blue light screen on his left arm, "Basil, transfer all resources as much as possible, quickly, now." "Yes, Lord Cottrell." Hearing Basil's answer, Cottrell's eyes returned to the fog below. The face under the mask twitched slightly, and his eyes followed with a slight jump. The anger in his heart was self-evident. The black fog below continued to spread, and the entire construction area was quickly shrouded. However, the black fog did not mean to stop, and continued to spread around. From the perspective of space, this area was already a black spot. However, at this time, Li Ming walked out along the black fog. With the induction of mental power, Li Ming could know the general situation around him to ensure his own safety. At the same time, Li Ming also released the flying dragon to determine his route. As for Tanjing, she had been carried on Li Ming's shoulders. It was only the early stage of the insect cave outbreak, so the number of alien insects was not large, and it would not spread quickly to the edge of the black fog. Taking advantage of this time, Li Ming had better follow the spread of the black fog and leave the construction area before making plans. After all, once it reaches the middle and late stages of the insect cave, a large number of alien insects will overflow, and the situation will be out of control at that time. Walking along the black fog, the place where the black fog spreads is where Li Ming wants to go. Unknowingly, Li Ming has been away from the construction area and came to a mountain range. The mountains and ridges are dangerous. According to Mao Yangxing's records, there are still many wild beasts in this place. At this time, Li Ming didn't care about these at all. It was the safest to stay away from the construction area. Continuing to walk along the mountain range, the black fog continued to spread. Unconsciously, Li Ming had come to a kernel. At this time, at the bottom of a mountain not far from Li Ming, there was a cave entrance. Under the induction of spiritual power, several wild beasts were running out of it. Perhaps they could not bear the erosion of the black fog, and these wild beasts fled far away. As soon as they left the cave, Li Ming, who sensed this scene, couldn't help but smile slightly. This undoubtedly made room for Li Ming to stay, and then quickened his pace to walk towards the cave. After a moment, Li Ming's figure appeared at the entrance of the cave. After sensing the inside, he walked in quickly. The structure of this cave is very strange, like an ant nest, with cave entrances and passages everywhere, as if entering a maze. However, Li Ming has sensed it very clearly. Although these passages are spread all over the underground and the entire mountain, there are no wild beasts staying inside, and it is empty. After confirming that it was safe, Li Ming continued to walk along the passage. According to the route he sensed, Li Ming walked upward. The upper part was inside the mountain, and the lower part was deep underground. The black fog had covered the entire underground. As for the upper part, because it was connected to the mountainside, this height was already beyond the reach of the black fog. He only felt that he was winding all the way up. Soon, the black fog around his body became lighter and lighter, and Li Ming had come to the upper part of the cave. There were many paths in all directions, but there was a large space at the top of each passage, like an independent small room. I don't know what kind of wild beast lived here before, but the layout of this cave is very interesting, like there are many independent bedrooms. He walked along the passage to one of the caves. According to the sense, this is already the largest of the many spaces, more than 10 meters long and wide, and 5 or 6 meters high, like the inside of a wine bottle. There are also 2 holes on the cave wall connecting to the outside, like 2 small windows. It was still night outside, but there was still faint starlight shining in. Li Ming came to a flat ground, and gently put Tanjing down from his shoulder. At this time, the poison was still spreading, and Tanjing's originally pretty face had turned red. Looking at Tanjing on the ground, Li Ming sighed slightly, and thought to himself, if she can't get treatment and the poison spreads, this woman will die. But I don't know any medical skills. Li Ming slowly sat cross-legged beside Tanjing, holding his chin with his right hand, and looked at her quietly. His eyes moved slightly, and his mind kept thinking. After a while, Li Ming took a breath with a hiss, staring at the red spots on Tanjing's body, and said to himself, this should be in the Death Medicine Alchemy Star Book. As he said this, Li Ming took out the Death Medicine Alchemy Star Book he had obtained before. Most of the abilities in this star book were developed by Mao. If he could find the pathogen, he might be able to find a countermeasure. Putting the star book in front of him, Li Ming began to search for the contents inside. After a moment, Li Ming's eyes suddenly opened, and he muttered to himself, Rainbow Bone. Rainbow Bone is a chronic poison energy, independently developed by Mao. This poison can be injected into the target's body in advance and remain hidden, but as long as it is needed, it can be detonated instantly. This poison energy will have a huge power at the moment of detonation, immediately paralyzing the function of the target organism, and then the poison energy will begin to spread little by little until the target organism is completely corroded and dies. The Death Medicine Star book only mentions how to use this ability and how to control it, but does not mention how to remove it. This made Li Ming shake his head slightly, and he said to himself, there is actually no way to remove the record? Or did Mayo deliberately not write it when he made the star record? No matter what, it was not important to Li Ming. He looked at Tanjing with his eyes, then looked at the Death Medicine Alchemy star record in his hand, shook his head slightly, and put the star record away, saying helplessly, there is no other way, I can only try. As he spoke, Li Ming rolled up the sleeves of his two arms, turned Tanjing over with his snow-white hands, and opened the vest on his back. There was a black shirt inside, and there was a big bulge on the left side, which bulged the shirt, as if something was stuffed in the clothes. Li Ming gently opened his shirt, and the whole back was covered with a large number of red spots, and the location of the red big bulge made people feel terrified after seeing it. The red tumor was beating slightly, like a heart, with protruding veins on the surface, just like blood vessels. There were also a lot of protruding skin and flesh tissues on the edge of the tumor. Just looking at it made Li Ming's scalp numb and his whole body uncomfortable. This thing is really disgusting. As he spoke, Li Ming's right hand was gently raised, palm down, facing the tumor. His eyes narrowed slightly, and after taking a deep breath, he said to himself, now I can only try the Ghost Key. In the Larsen Light Medicine Star book, Ghost Key is an ability that Li Ming cultivated from the Light Medicine Star book. The effect of this ability is to heal injuries, but Li Ming is not sure whether it can work on the rainbow bone. At present, he is just trying it. Layers of green light lit up on the surface of Li Ming's right hand. The green light was in a virtual state and wrapped Li Ming's hand in it, just like a ball of light on his right hand. The palm of his hand was half a foot high from the tumor. Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly, and the green light suddenly became brighter. Then, small green shadows flew out from it. The green shadow was only the size of a thumb, like a water drop, but with holes like eyes and noses. It was like a floating ghost. Every time it floated out, the halo on the palm would dim a little, but Li Ming would continue to supply energy to restore the green halo to light. These small ghosts were agile and free. After a while, they would drill into the red tumor. The green things could be seen swimming in the red tumor with the naked eye, but they would fly out after just a few seconds. Before entering the tumor, it was still green, and when it came out, it turned red, and then flew into the air, and broke apart with a bang, like a balloon bursting. Every green ghost that appeared would consume Li Ming's energy. Similarly, every ghost that left the tumor would take away some poison energy. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 378 Morning Star Meeting. The green ghost rushed out of Li Ming's hand, entered the tumor, and then took out the poison energy from the tumor to self-destruct. After repeating this process, Li Ming's energy was getting less and less, and the poison energy of the tumor was also weakening little by little. Overall, it still had a great effect. Li Ming looked at this scene and nodded slightly, saying, it seems to have some effect, but this consumes too much energy, right? Li Ming muttered to himself, with a worried look on his face. After a treatment, Li Ming could only stop and then recover his energy on his own, but Li Ming would not consume too much energy at one time. After all, the place he was in was not very safe now, so he still had to keep some energy for backup. When he took his hand away from Tanjing's back, the size and color of the tumor did not change significantly, but the stripes all over Tanjing's body were smaller. Li Ming took a deep breath, looked at Tanjing on the ground, and whispered, the effect is not very obvious, and so much energy has been used. Forget it. I'll take a break first. Turning around, Li Ming was no longer facing Tanjing, and began to recover his own energy by adjusting his breath and resting his mind. At this time, there was no need to take pills to recover. He could just absorb the power of the nebula bit by bit. While absorbing the energy, Li Ming suddenly thought of something. He turned his right hand, and a blue light flashed in his palm. A red lotus appeared in his hand. This flower was Ringsu. Looking at it, Li Ming whispered, "This Ringsu is the same as the one Larson used back then. Mayo added other substances to it, so it's still useless." Looking at it, Li Ming sighed and shook his head, but his eyes moved slightly, as if he thought of something again, and took a long breath with a hiss. If the extra things inside can be extracted, can this Ringsu be used? Whispering like this, Li Ming's eyes flashed slightly, and a smile appeared on his face. With this idea, Li Ming immediately started to act. With a slight force on his right hand, the red lotus slowly floated up and came to the front of Li Ming's body. Thinking of the synthesis technique in his mind, his hands began to dance. Strips of green light flew out of Li Ming's hands. As he waved his hands, the green light began to rotate around the red lotus. Li Ming slowly closed his eyes and used his consciousness to control the green light and began to remove the materials in Ringsu that were not good for him. The synthesis of Ringsu was relatively complex, and the materials in it were also very rare. Li Ming had already mastered its synthesis techniques and material configuration. As for the extra materials, Li Ming also found out from Mayo's brain, but whether it could be removed or not, he could only try. In Li Ming's opinion, this Ringsu itself was unusable. Instead of destroying or throwing it away, it would be better to try to remove the harmful substances himself. It was on this basis that Li Ming made a bold attempt. Li Ming tried to study Ringsu, but at this moment in the Milky Way, the war situation had entered a white-hot stage. The Milky Way has now been divided into 3 major battlefields. The first battlefield is located in the starfield, where the Hawaii Alliance of the Milky Way is located. The main battle is concentrated in the inner galaxy. The second battlefield is another area of the Milky Way, which is opposite to the position of the Hawaii Alliance. The third battlefield is the outer system of the Milky Way. The battle between the low-level civilizations of the outer system and the low-level invaders is also huge. This is just a relatively concentrated large battlefield, and there are many smaller scale wars in other places. The flames of war have almost spread throughout the entire Milky Way. At this time, a major meeting was being held on the planet Isaiah, the headquarters of the Hawaii Alliance. In a space shrouded in darkness, Abel stood alone on several floating tiles. This space was the space where Li Ming had his energy duel before. At this moment, there were already many screens floating above the space. These people also came from various alliances, but there was a huge screen just above these small screens. The alien on that huge screen was different from the others. He was tall, had a round head, was thin, and wore a strange set of armor. This person's prestige was obviously higher than that of everyone else. Even Abel could only be cautious in front of him. He was Reynolds, an alien from the advanced civilization in the inner system of the Milky Way. I have seen the battle situation in our Milky Way. It is not completely at a disadvantage overall, but the prospects are not clear. After all, we are dealing with 3 large galaxies. It is not easy to achieve this step. Reynolds looked at the screen and said lightly. But after these words, the people below showed strange expressions. Some were in deep thought, while others were puzzled. It seemed that in their opinion, as an advanced civilization in the Milky Way, they should not say such words. Even if they had objections in their hearts, these people did not dare to say much, and could only whisper secretly. Reynolds naturally saw through these things and continued. Now I might as well tell you that the second interval civilizations of the 3 major galaxies have also been dispatched, but they have not yet taken action. Zimandal of the Large Magellanic Galaxy has a 1.4 level civilization. Sturius of the Small Magellanic Galaxy also has a 1.4 level civilization, and even Cottrell of the Pegasus Galaxy has a 1.3 level civilization. Once these high-level people in the second interval take action, how should our Milky Way respond? As soon as these words were spoken, everyone immediately fell silent. From the first level civilization to the second level civilization, there are 3 intervals. The strength within the same interval may be divided according to the energy volume. cultivation star status, civilization background, etc. But once the interval is crossed, the use of energy will undergo a qualitative change, and the gap in strength will eliminate all factors. No matter what your civilization background is, or what star nationality you have cultivated, in the face of such absolute strength as the interval, you can only escape. Naturally, everyone is very clear about this. No one could answer the last question raised by Reynolds. After a few seconds, Reynolds took a deep breath and said, "Simandl has contacted me. They have the intention to negotiate. They will arrange for Cottrell to lead 3 representatives to the planet of Isaiah for peace talks. You should also send 3 representatives." At the end, Reynolds added, "Cottrell is a 1.3 level civilization. I will send Nona from the inner system. Nona is also a 1.3 level civilization. This way, we will be equal. You should prepare first." After saying this, Yarborough was the first to look displeased. After hesitating for a while, he replied, "Lord Reynolds, now is a stalemate on the battlefield. Peace talks at this time." Before Yarborough could finish, Reynolds' face changed immediately, and he said sternly, "Yarborough, I know what you are going to say, but there are some things I must remind you. In our local galaxy group, the largest galaxies are our Milky Way and the Perseus galaxy. If we overconsume energy and combat power because of war, it will be very dangerous. The ones attacking the Milky Way this time are the Large Magellanic Galaxy, the Small Magellanic Galaxy, and the Pegasus Galaxy. But you know that the Draco Galaxy and the Carina Galaxy are also eyeing us. What do you think the consequences of a long-term war will be?" Reynolds was obviously very angry, and these words seemed to have awakened everyone. After all, there were civilizations in the second zone, and they obviously knew more and thought more than those in the first zone. Abel could only bow his head slightly and said nothing. At this time, Reynolds also glanced at the others, and after making sure that no one had any objections, he said, "This meeting is named the Morning Star Meeting. You all should prepare to go. In the middle of the negotiations, I will go to Isaiah with Sterius of the Small Magellanic Galaxy to promote the results of the negotiations." As soon as the voice fell, the connection was immediately disconnected, as if this order was irresistible. This cognitive advanced civilization knew about the local galaxy group, but no one had thought that far. The so-called local group is a group of large galaxies including the Milky Way. Galaxy groups are also divided into large and small. The large ones may have 50 large galaxies, and the small ones have at least 20. The 2 largest galaxies in the local group are the Milky Way and the Perseus Galaxy. The Perseus Galaxy is even larger than the Milky Way. It belongs to the local group with the Milky Way. There are also many satellite galaxies near both. Because of the similarity in size, the relationship between the two is also very subtle. Whether it is an advanced civilization or a low-level civilization, the most important thing is to protect resources and hide oneself in order to survive. The cause of war is the same. Once the environmental resources for the survival of civilized creatures are exhausted, or factors that are not suitable for survival occur, they will look for new places. Chapter 379, Advancement. Plunder and aggression are happening all the time in every corner of the universe, but survival is the common goal of all civilized creatures. The purpose of this meeting hosted by Reynolds is for this purpose. Once the two sides can reach a consensus, the war can be avoided, which is naturally beneficial to both sides. The negotiations and wars here are going on simultaneously. At this time, the advantage in the war situation is undoubtedly the most important bargaining chip in the negotiations. At this moment, Li Ming is not aware of the development of the war in the outside world. He is busy every day in the cave. On the one hand, he has to remove the rainbow erosion bone for Tanjing, and on the other hand, he has to purify Ringsu. Li Ming is exhausted from dealing with the rainbow erosion bone on Tanjing's body. He consumes a lot of energy, but the effect is minimal. He barely saved the other party's life, but it is still unlikely to save the other party. However, Li Ming has gained a lot from the evolution of Ringsu. After days of hard work, the excess materials in Ringsu are also being removed bit by bit. The real Ringsu, the flower part is crystal clear with a slight white color, and the flower base is green. After Li Ming's long purification, the originally red Ringsu in front of him has turned white, but there are occasional red dots in it. Looking at the ringsu in front of him, Li Ming's face showed a slight smile, and he whispered, "It seems that I will be able to advance soon." As he spoke, Li Ming's hands continued to operate, and the green light flashed. The green ribbons kept rotating around the lotus, which was purifying little by little. After a while, the ringsu in front of him glowed slightly, and the red dots in it disappeared. The whole became crystal clear, like a gem. Li Ming's hands slowly put down, his eyes were already stunned, and he said excitedly, "This is the real ringsu. With it, I can directly reach the 1.3 level civilization." Li Ming's eyes were shining, and he was excited. Even his body was a little uncomfortable. After all, this is a huge increase in civilization. Whispering in his mouth, his eyes turned, and he looked at Tang Jing, who was still in a coma, and immediately turned his gaze back to ringsu. From level 1 to level 1.1, 2 flowing cloud powers are needed. From level 1.1 to level 1.2, 3 flowing cloud powers are needed. From level 1.2 to level 1.3, 4 flowing cloud powers are needed. There are 9 flowing cloud powers in total. Li Ming has 3 civilizations, which is 3 times 9, so there are 27 flowing cloud powers. If it was when he just entered the advanced civilization, Li Ming really couldn't take out so many flowing cloud powers, but now it's different. The gifts Li Ming received after becoming a permanent resident, plus the resources Li Ming received from destroying the giant blue hole in the outer system, and Li Ming got flowing cloud power from Brendan, who has died. The total number has reached 30. Even if the 27 required for advancement are excluded, Li Ming still has 3 left. With a light hum, Li Ming swung his arm, and 27 flowing cloud powers have emerged, rotating around Li Ming like 27 leaves. Each one of them emits a little starlight, like the stars in the universe. Looking at the floating power of flowing clouds, Li Ming raised his hand again, and the ringsu immediately floated to the top of Li Ming's head. The power of flowing clouds was rotating around Li Ming, and the ringsu above his head was already in place. It can be said that all preparations were in place, and only the advancement began. This must be the most critical time, and there must not be any chaos in the middle. To be on the safe side, Li Ming waved his hand again, and a grey light flew out from the cloak behind him. It was Walker. Li Ming looked at Walker and said, "I'll take care of you for the time being." Walker looked at the situation around Li Ming, nodded slightly, and walked directly to the cave entrance. Seeing this scene, Li Ming was relieved. After taking a deep breath, he closed his eyes slightly. Suddenly, the ringsu above his head shone brightly, and a huge shadow appeared. This shadow looked exactly like the ringsu, but the shadow was larger in size. It wrapped Li Ming up as soon as it appeared. From a distance, it seemed as if Li Ming was sitting in a lotus. After ringsu was in place, the 27 flowing cloud powers began to rotate around Li Ming. During the rotation, the flowing cloud powers began to merge into the phantom one by one, like green leaves returning to the flower. After each flowing cloud power entered ringsu, the lotus became brighter. As all 27 flowing cloud powers entered it, the entire ringsu phantom shone brightly, illuminating the entire cave. At this time, the lotus seemed not to be a phantom, but a real lotus. Li Ming's expression was calm and there was no change, but the next second, the ringsu phantom suddenly shrank, and there was a muffled bang, as if a fire suddenly went out. The entire ringsu phantom entered Li Ming's body at once. At this moment, a powerful shock wave shot out from Li Ming's body. This shock wave was not a fixed string or circle, but spread out like a crescent sword energy. The sword energy wave shot out in all directions with Li Ming as the center, as if every pore in Li Ming's body was releasing this sword wave. Walker narrowed his eyes slightly, and thought to himself, not good. His figure jumped quickly, and with a flash of grey light, he came to Tang Jing's side. He opened his mouth and bit Tang Jing's arm, then ran to the bottom of the cave quickly. This cave reaches the mountainside, and goes down to the ground. Considering the strange phenomenon caused by Li Ming's advancement, it is undoubtedly the safest to go underground. As soon as Walker left, a shock wave flew over. With a loud boom, a big hole immediately broke out in the mountain. Then the sound of boom 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 continued, and the shock wave spread out like thousands of sword ki. In the blink of an eye, the mountain where Li Ming was no longer existed. The mountain was broken into pieces like tofu, and fell into the black fog below. When the whole mountain was cut into pieces and slid down, Li Ming sat cross-legged in the air, and the outside world was now fully revealed. From time to time, unknown alien insects appeared in the black fog, and various alien insects were flying in the sky. The alien insects were of various shapes and sizes, all about 3 or 4 meters in size, like mosquitoes in the vast sky. They were not very big, but their numbers were astonishing. The sound of buzzing was endless, and anyone who saw this scene would stay away from it. After all, this unconscious creature had nothing to do except its brutal aggressiveness. As the mountain collapsed, Li Ming's figure appeared, and these alien insects immediately noticed Li Ming. But before these alien insects could react, countless shock-wave blades swept in. Like a transparent air-cutting knife, everything was split and broken wherever it passed, and only the sound of swooshing filled the surroundings. The alien insects in the sky were instantly shattered. The body was just cut in half by a wave blade in the last second, and before it fell to the ground, it was cut by another wave blade flying again. This caused all objects within a radius of 100 kilometers to be cut and shattered. The vast mountain range collapsed and turned into a plain. The buildings in the distance were cut off piece by piece like chopped bamboo. Even the black fog on the ground was dissipated by the impact of this wave of blades, and the strange insects that occasionally appeared in the black fog died instantly. This strange phenomenon lasted for more than 10 seconds and then stopped. The faint light on Li Ming's body gradually dissipated, and the ring-su above his head turned black and fell to the ground. Li Ming's eyes slowly opened, and his expression was calm and natural after seeing the changes happening around him, as if he had sensed all this in advance. My lord, I was too excited and absorbed all the power into my body at once. So, Li Ming whispered with a worried look on his face. Li Ming knew the use of ring-su. After the ring-su phantom absorbed the power of the flowing cloud, it meant that ring-su could withstand this amount of the power of the flowing cloud, but it was also close to the limit. Simply put, it is to first use the phantom of ring-su to absorb the power of the flowing clouds, and then directly transfer it into the body of the person who is advancing. The slower the transfer, the more conducive it is for the body to absorb, and there will be no accidents and celestial phenomena. If it is transferred quickly, although it can be directly advanced, it will cause damage to the body and form various celestial phenomena. Li Ming's body, which has taken Luang Dan, will naturally not be affected, but this celestial phenomenon is also particularly conspicuous. Fortunately, there are already black fog and alien insects around, and there are no other civilizations. If Cottrell saw it, there would be a lot of trouble. Chapter 380 Return. The cross-legged body slowly stood up in the air. At this time, powerful energy filled the whole body. The feeling came from the heart, as if any object in the eyes was under his control. Li Ming was enjoying this feeling. Suddenly, there were 2 dong-dong sounds from the ground below him, and then several huge rocks slid down and rolled to the side. He glanced down and saw a hole where the boulder had turned over. His eyes narrowed slightly, and a black figure flashed out from it. It was Walker. "Walker?" he said, and the figure flashed to the ground. Walker bit Tanjing's arm and tried to drag her out of the hole. Li Ming leaned over and stretched out his arm to grab Tanjing's wrist. Then he gently pulled, and Tanjing's body flew out of the hole. He glanced at Tanjing's wrist and face. The mark was still there, and the person was unconscious. Li Ming carried him on his shoulder. He gently extended his right hand, and a blue light flashed. A star capsule kept shining in Li Ming's palm. After a few seconds, there was a muffled bang and a silver spaceship suddenly appeared. This spaceship was the one Li Ming took when he set out from the Huai Alliance. When returning to the central system, Li Ming put it away and took Brendan's black spaceship, which was just in time for use. "Walker, let's go." After Li Ming finished speaking, he flew towards the spaceship, and Walker flashed a grey light and disappeared into Li Ming's cloak. The blue light ripples on the surface of the spaceship spread out, opening a portal. As soon as Li Ming's body touched the ripples, he entered it and disappeared. When he came to the main cabin, Li Ming put Tanjing back on the ground, looked at the operating table with his eyes, exerted a little force, and a green light flashed in his eyes. He had already issued a certain order, and then the spaceship started, and a series of transmission coordinates automatically appeared on the operating table. At this time, Li Ming was planning to return to the headquarters of the Huai Alliance. The spaceship will be automatically transported next, and Li Ming turned his eyes to Tanjing. After his eyes slightly turned, he raised his hand and turned Tanjing's body over. He let Tanjing lie on the ground and then turned over the vest and shirt on his back. The red tumor did not change at all. Li Ming raised his right hand, looked at his palm, and suddenly turned his hand over, palm down. Green light flashed and began to treat it. After the advancement, Li Ming's energy volume naturally increased greatly, which also increased the healing effect of the ghost key a lot. Li Ming spared no effort to heal it with all his heart. The effect was indeed remarkable under his full strength. The stripes distributed around the body began to disappear quickly. Even the size of the tumor was reduced a lot. With the disappearance of the red stripes, Tanjing's originally white skin was revealed. Previously, because it was all red stripes, it made people feel uncomfortable and a little disgusting. But once the stripes disappeared, the smooth and white skin made Li Ming's eyes widen. Not only did her eyes widen a little, but her head also leaned forward a little. At this time, the spots all over Tanjing's body had basically disappeared, and even the tumor was only the size of an egg, which was already quite different from before. With these changes, Tanjing, who was lying on the ground motionless, suddenly opened his eyes. His body was still motionless, but his eyes were open, and his eyeballs turned slightly in his eye sockets, looking at Li Ming. At this time, Li Ming's head leaned out like a duck, his eyes were wide and round, and there was even a trace of blood flowing from his nostrils. "Your nose is bleeding," Tanjing suddenly said. This sudden sound startled Li Ming, and his body couldn't help but shrink back, looking at Tanjing in surprise, and unconsciously wiped his nostrils with the back of his hand, and some blood did flow out. Li Ming looked at the blood on the back of his hand, then looked at Tanjing who had woken up, and said hesitantly, this is because I just overconsumed energy. As he said this, Li Ming turned his body, facing Tanjing with his back, and said seriously, although the spread of toxic energy has been temporarily curbed, if the iris bone is not removed, the tumor will always be there, and your life will still be in danger. As he spoke, his two hands were still groping for something to plug the bleeding nostrils. Tanjing listened carefully, sat up slowly, looked at Li Ming's busy hands with his back to him, nodded, and asked, "What are you doing?" Li Ming hurriedly blocked his nostrils with a star bag, then slowly put down his hands and said, "I overconsumed energy and now I need to recover." While speaking, Li Ming flipped his right hand and took out another star bag, but when he saw the star bag, Li Ming showed hesitation, his eyes rolled, and finally waved his hand to throw the star bag behind him. "This is the soul refining pill I made in advance. If you take one pill a day, it will be enough for a long time. As for the rainbow eroded bone behind you, I will help you find a solution from the Guangaeo star book." After saying this, Li Ming closed his eyes slightly. Tanjing took the star bag, glanced at Li Ming's back, and then his eyes returned to the star bag. A blue light flashed in his palm, and the star bag disappeared, replaced by a green pill. He flipped his palm and put the pill into his mouth, then closed his eyes and remained silent. Although Li Ming was recovering his energy, he knew very well that Tanjing was extremely weak now. If the rainbow eroded bone was not removed, Tanjing might die at any time. The ghost key could only treat the symptoms, but not the root cause. Although he said that he would find a cure from Guangaeo, there was no cure in Guangaeo star book. This made Li Ming feel a little sad, and he couldn't help thinking, "I have no grudges or friendship with this woman. I just gave her a lot of pills, and they are all my consciousness. If I eat them like this, won't I be able to get rid of her in the future? Besides, do I have to save her?" As he said this in his heart, Li Ming opened his eyes slightly and glanced behind him. As soon as he saw Tanjing's pure and lovely face, Li Ming immediately took a deep breath, turned his head again, and thought to himself, "No, I can't just watch him die, not to mention that he still has some looks." Thinking of this, Li Ming sighed again, shook his head slightly, and didn't think about it anymore. 3 systems. I say at the headquarters of the Hua Alliance, Li Ming's spaceship was slowly approaching, and after a long transmission, he finally arrived at the headquarters of the Alliance where he was. During the transmission, Li Ming also treated Tanjing many times to ensure that the poison would not continue to worsen. Seeing the blue-green planet on the operating table, Li Ming smiled slightly. At this time, Tanjing had a grim expression on his face. He looked at the operating table, then looked at Li Ming and said, "Are you going to hand me over to the advanced civilization in the Milky Way?" Li Ming paused after hearing this, looked back at Tanjing, and replied, "You think too much. If it weren't for you, I would not have been able to escape from Cottrell's hands, so I won't do anything harmful to you. I brought you to Isaiah to see if the biological civilization here has any way to help you detoxify." Tanjing glanced at the operating table coldly, his face full of displeasure, and said, "I don't want to have any social interactions with the people here. Take me away from here." Tanjing's tone was stiff, and he seemed unwilling to socialize with outsiders. Li Ming frowned, looked at Tanjing, smiled slightly, and said, "Don't worry, I brought you here just to help you detoxify, and I have no other ideas. If the rainbow bone erosion in your body cannot be cured here, I promise you that I will take you away from here and go somewhere else." Tanjing also glanced at Li Ming coldly, his face was cold, his mouth slightly opened, and said, "Rainbow bone, no one can cure it except Cottrell." Li Ming paused after hearing this, but immediately snorted lightly. His eyes turned back to the operating table. After hesitating for a moment, he said intentionally or unintentionally, "But Cottrell is the one who wants to kill you." Tanjing's face did not change. His eyes were as if in a daze, and he said, "He saved my life once and killed me once. Between him and me, we owe each other nothing." Li Ming stood there without moving, but his slightly narrowed eyes had already seen Tanjing's inner thoughts. After humming secretly, he let out a long sigh. Sure enough, this woman and I are not the same kind of people. All she has in her mind is revenge. Li Ming said to himself, but when Li Ming used his wisdom eyes to explore deeply, he couldn't help but frowned and said to himself, "But why can't I find her enemy from her memory?" His eyes returned to the operating table, and he said nothing. Chapter 381 Return. Deep in Tanjing's memory, there was darkness and hatred, but Li Ming could not see where the hatred came from, or which civilizations the enemies were. It was as if that memory was a bottomless black hole, and he could only see the general idea, but could not see the things in the depths. Li Ming did not care about this, and watched the spaceship approaching Isaiah little by little, and whispered secretly, after helping her cure the rainbow bone, "I will find a way to solve the problem of refining the spirit pill. As for her hatred, I can only help her so far." This inner sigh was exactly Li Ming saw through the obsession deep in the other party's heart, which had nothing but hatred. Unknowingly, Li Ming had been staring at the other party for a long time. Noticing Li Ming's gaze, Tanjing suddenly turned his eyes and looked back at Li Ming, saying, "Why are you looking at me?" Li Ming smiled slightly. He said, "I'm looking at hope." Tanjing's serious expression suddenly felt inexplicable, but he just glanced at Li Ming. Tanjing was now extremely weak. If she didn't get rid of the cancer in her body, she could only be manipulated by others. Even though she didn't want to go to Isaiah, she had no choice. In the space of Isaiah, Li Ming's silver spaceship was already in place. At this time, the spaceship had been handed over to the ground control. Li Ming only needed to wait. At this time, a heated discussion was taking place in a conference room on Isaiah. On the left side of the conference table was a gentle long-haired alien. His face was somewhat similar to that of a human, but his nose was very sharp, his ears were very long, his skin was brown, and each hair was as thick as a finger, like a hemp rope. This person was the representative from the inner system, Nona. There were two people sitting next to him. One was the commander of the Hua Alliance, Yarbrough, and the other was the commander of the Huff Alliance, Twek. There were also three people sitting opposite the three people, led by Cottrell, and the two people next to him were also 1.2 level civilizations, namely Pooh, the representative of the Large Magellanic Galaxy, and Quick, the representative of the Small Magellanic Galaxy. Cottrell was still wearing a mask, but his eyes were full of pride. He said fiercely, "It seems that there was no substantial progress in yesterday's negotiations, but our requirements have not changed. It must be 5 resource starfields." Nona also looked serious and replied, "We can only allocate 4 resource starfields." Cottrell laughed and said, "Do you think we have traveled hundreds of thousands of light years to come here to negotiate with you? Do you think I came back this time to negotiate? No, it's to take back what belongs to us. If you refuse, it means that we can only solve the problem through war, Cottrell said impatiently. Nona's face changed slightly at this time. Even if she was angry, she could only suppress it temporarily. Cottrell's eyes were extremely satisfied, and he laughed, saying, "The resources of the galaxy are limited, but desires are unlimited. You should learn how to make choices, otherwise, the consequences may be even more serious." As he spoke, Cottrell stood up, looked at Nona and Yarborough opposite him, and said, "I don't like war, but I don't reject it either. However, I must get what belongs to me." After saying this, Cottrell turned and walked out, and Pew and Quick beside him also left without stopping. Nona still sat there without moving. Her face was not looking good. Yarborough was also extremely helpless. He looked at Twick on the other side, and finally looked at Nona. At this time, Nona looked stern and said, "This negotiation will be divided into 3 days. Today is the second day. If we can't reach an agreement tomorrow, then..." As Nona was talking, the whole building suddenly trembled, and then a muffled bang sounded. What happened? Nona stood up directly. Yarborough and Twick were also startled. They stood up and walked outside in a hurry. At this moment, at the entrance of the conference building, there was a huge deep pit on the ground, and 2 groups of people were confronting each other. On one side were Cottrell and others, and on the other side were Li Ming and Tanjing. At this time, Li Ming had already suppressed the first level civilization with the Panlang. This was also to avoid trouble. After all, the boss here has always been Yarborough. If he showed his true strength, he would certainly be rejected. Even if he showed the first level civilization, Li Ming's permanent position could provide him with great convenience. But what Li Ming didn't expect was that he ran into Cottrell and others as soon as he arrived at the conference building, which surprised Li Ming. Not far away stood Xenia, Jija, Biggs and others. Cottrell looked at Li Ming angrily. His eyes were full of ferocity, and he raised his hand and said, "I didn't expect you to be here. This time, I'll see how you can escape." As soon as he finished speaking, Cottrell was about to take action, but at this moment, 3 figures suddenly came to Cottrell's side. Among them, Nona said directly, "What? The negotiations haven't ended yet, and you want to start a war in advance? It seems that you have no sincerity in this negotiation at all." Cottrell paused when he heard this. His eyes turned slightly to look at Nona's position, and his raised hand was put down. But when he saw Li Ming, Cottrell couldn't suppress his anger, and his mouth was even more bared. But after a few seconds, his expression suddenly changed. His ferocious eyes slowed down, and he looked at Nona again. He smiled slightly and walked over. "Regarding this negotiation, we are of course sincere, otherwise I would not be here in person. Now I have a proposal. If you can agree, I will immediately sign the agreement to obtain only 4-star regions," Cottrell said slowly, and while speaking, he glanced at Li Ming a few times. Li Ming looked at Cottrell and then at Nona. His eyes narrowed slightly, and his wisdom eyes were activated. Nona's expression immediately brightened after hearing Cottrell's words. She turned to look at Cottrell and said, "Sign immediately?" Cottrell smiled and nodded, and continued, "Of course. After all, we have talked about it once before, and today I changed my mind temporarily." Nona also smiled slightly at this moment and replied, "Then tell me your proposal. As long as it is not an unreasonable request, we will try our best to meet it." Hearing this, Cottrell turned around. His eyes flashed with cold light, looked at Li Ming and Tanjing, and said fiercely, "As long as these 2 people become corpses, I will sign the agreement immediately." While speaking, his eyes also glanced at Nona beside him. Nona was excited to hear this, and her eyes instantly turned to Li Ming and Tanjing. Li Ming was startled, and his eyes naturally saw the conversation between the 2. However, as soon as he moved, a large group of soldiers surrounded him, and the eyes of the aliens around him also turned to Li Ming. Li Ming frowned slightly, and his face changed slightly, and he was already cautious. Nona didn't know Li Ming. After a light glance, she looked at Yarborough beside her, with a bit of doubt in her eyes. When Yarborough received Nona's eyes, he couldn't help but look at Li Ming, and then shook his head slightly. Although they were all words, their meanings were conveyed. Nona looked at Li Ming again, and showed a thoughtful look. After hesitating for a while, she looked at Cottrell again and said, "I need to discuss this temporarily, and reply to you later." Cottrell laughed and said, "Of course, this is possible, but you'd better think it through. This is the only way to reach an agreement. Otherwise, we can only solve it with war." Nona didn't say anything else. She turned to the side, and Yaba and others also surrounded her. Nona glanced at Li Ming in the distance, and after a glance at the people in front of her, she said, "Who is this person?" Yaba was about to say something but didn't speak. Instead, he looked at Xenia beside him. Xenia quickly replied, "His name is Li Ming. He is from the outside system. He joined our alliance after entering the first level civilization by chance. However, his strength is not bad, so he was elected as a permanent resident of our alliance." Nona nodded slightly after hearing this, and her face showed that she was thinking about something else, but she didn't say much. Zenny continued, "When the galactic war just broke out, he was sent to the outer system to destroy the giant blue hole, and he successfully completed the mission. He has just returned to Isaiah. He was away for quite a while, so he must have gone through a lot of hardships to complete the mission." Chapter 382 All must die. After hearing about Li Ming's deeds, Nona nodded repeatedly, with a look of satisfaction on her face. Abel, who was standing by, then added, "Although Li Ming has joined the alliance not long ago, he has made great contributions, and he has just returned. It is naturally inappropriate to kill him at this time." Abel said this, and Xenia and Yeager also nodded repeatedly. But Nona's face changed slightly, and she glanced at the three people with a cold look, and said, "This person's great contribution is indeed worthy of praise, but now it involves the entire galaxy. You just heard that. If these two people are not killed, Cottrell will start a war, and the hard-won negotiation situation will be in vain. War means more deaths. Isn't it worth it to use one or two people to exchange for the peace of the entire galaxy?" Nona continued. As soon as these words were spoken, Abel, Xenia and others were stunned and looked at each other. And Twek, who also heard these words, nodded with satisfaction. Nona then continued, "Your focus should not only be on the alliance, but also on the level of the Milky Way. Li Ming has made great contributions, and this sacrifice is also for our entire Milky Way. After he dies, a galactic hero monument will be erected for him for all civilizations to admire. As a member of the Milky Way, you should be like him." After saying this, Abel, Xenia and others actually nodded helplessly, as if they felt that what Nona said made some sense. Tweak, who had been silent, smiled and said, "Lady Nona is right. This is the glory of your Hua Alliance and the glory of our galaxy." Although Yaburo was extremely reluctant, there seemed to be no better way at the moment. After all, everyone had the tragic memory of the First Galactic War, and war and death were everywhere. If the lives of one or two people could be exchanged for peace, it would be justified. After taking a deep breath, he whispered, "Okay." Seeing that everyone agreed, Nona came back to Cottrell with satisfaction. After a slight smile, she said, "After our discussion, we agree to your request. Cottrell, get ready to sign." Cottrell nodded slightly without saying a word. He looked directly at Li Ming and Tanjing, and said, "I will sign when I see the bodies." Nona snorted softly after hearing this, and naturally understood what the other party meant. Then she looked at Li Ming, waved her hand at Li Ming, and signaled the soldiers to take Li Ming down. Seeing this gesture, the soldiers really ran towards Li Ming. At this time, Li Ming's face was extremely gloomy. After sensing the approaching soldiers, he suddenly waved his hand behind him. This action was very casual, just like an ordinary person waving his hand casually. But just like this casually, several soldiers behind him instantly disappeared from the spot with a bang. This action made everyone startled, and immediately made a gesture of fighting. But Nona still had a peaceful expression. She looked at Li Ming with her eyes, smiled slightly, and said, "Li Ming, I just met you today, and I also know your contribution. It is also a helpless move to exchange your life for the peace of the Milky Way. I will posthumously award you as the Milky Way Peace Hero. I hope you will consider the overall situation and not make unnecessary struggles." Li Ming's expression did not change at all when he heard this. He looked at Nona, then at Yaburo and others who were waiting for battle, and finally stopped his gaze on Cottrell. The corners of his mouth rose and he chuckled. With a smile like this, Li Ming turned his head slightly and looked at Tanjing beside him. He gently raised his right hand and placed it on Tanjing's shoulder, saying, "Did you hear that? They want to use my life to exchange for the so-called peace in the Milky Way." Tanjing's expression was as cold as ever. He looked at Li Ming, then at the others, without saying a word. However, a stiff smile began to appear on Li Ming's twitching face. The laughter was very low, as if something very funny had happened, and Li Ming had been trying hard to hold back his laughter. But after a few seconds, Li Ming couldn't help laughing up to the sky. Ha 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 ha. The hearty laughter resounded through the sky and filled the surroundings, as if something extremely funny had really happened. Such a loud laugh stunned everyone, and some people even looked at each other in confusion. Just when everyone was puzzled, Li Ming's laughter stopped abruptly. Although the laughter stopped, the muscles on Li Ming's face kept beating, and he even laughed to tears. While wiping his tears, he whispered, "Use my life in exchange for your peace." At this point, he put his arm down, and his face suddenly became solemn. Looking at Li Ming's eyes again, his eyeballs were already green and two-cornered. In his cold eyes, the cold light was revealed, and his gloomy face was full of murderous intent. It was like the face of the death god of hell, dark, ruthless, and terrifying. "It's better to use your lives to exchange for my peace." His mouth moved slightly, and the words were already spoken. His eyes widened a little, and at this moment, the breath of Li Ming's body spread out. The deterrent power of the 1.3 level civilization instantly spread around, and the aura was like an invisible and silent sword, instantly piercing everyone's nerves. Yarborough and the others were stunned for a moment. Their eyes widened. The Hua Alliance and the Huff Alliance were very clear about Li Ming's strength, but at that time Li Ming was only a first level civilization. But now, Li Ming is already a 1.3 level civilization. Under such an aura, even Nona and Cottrell were surprised. It was still a first level civilization just now. How come it's? Nona was secretly surprised. The people around were whispering constantly, and the momentum of preparing for a battle was withdrawn a lot. Tanjing, who was beside Li Ming, naturally also sensed Li Ming's imposing aura. She looked at the opposite side, then at Li Ming, and said, "You'd better not mess around. There are so many of them." Before Tanjing finished speaking, 3 words came out from Li Ming's teeth. "Al must be." As soon as the voice fell, Li Ming's body suddenly banged and burned with a blue flame. The flame burned extremely violently, like the flame at the tail of a jet plane. As soon as such a powerful energy was released, the crystal floor under his feet cracked, which was caused by the powerful energy pressure. Instant light. Bang. Li Ming's figure disappeared instantly. Before these people could react, Li Ming had already grabbed Nona's neck. Ah. Nona made a painful sound, and it was this sound that attracted everyone's attention. This also made everyone dumbfounded, with a look of fear on their faces. Li Ming's teleportation really shocked everyone. That speed was something that ordinary aliens could not keep up with. Nona was also shocked. She quickly raised her hands and grabbed Li Ming's wrist. Her body surface suddenly flashed with a faint blue light, which was to activate energy to resist. Although they were both 1.3 level civilizations, Li Ming's energy volume was 3 times higher than that of the other party, which was naturally not comparable to the other party. A pair of cold eyes looked at Nona quietly and said, "If you like to decide other people's life and death so much, you should sacrifice your own life first." As he said so, Li Ming's right hand suddenly exerted force, but just when Li Ming was about to strangle him in his palm, Cottrell on the side suddenly winked at Quick behind him. Quick immediately understood and flew out and actually went straight to Tanjing. Li Ming's eyes moved and he immediately discovered the other party's intention. His right hand suddenly loosened and with a push, his body went straight to Tanjing. It seemed that Li Ming only pushed lightly, but the force was very amazing. Only a loud bang was heard and Nona's body shot out like a bullet. After a loud bang, Nona hit the crystal building behind her hard, and the crystal building instantly collapsed, with gravel and dust flying, and a big hole appeared on the surface of the building. On the other side, Quick's figure had arrived in front of Tanjing, but before he could make a move, a figure flashed. Quick was shocked, and turned his head to look. He saw a big foot aimed at his face and kicked over. Bang, boom. With this kick, Quick flew directly out and hit the ground in the distance. Gravel and dust burst out like a bomb exploding. Li Ming raised his leg, glanced at the others, and slowly retracted his leg. Chapter 383, Poem of Peace. The atmosphere on the field suddenly solidified. Li Ming's 2 consecutive attacks had fully demonstrated his strength. The phrase "almost die" did not seem to be empty talk. Everyone was trembling with fear and tense. Even Nona, who was also a 1.3 level civilization, could not cope with Li Ming's sudden attack. It can be imagined that Li Ming's methods were sharp, which made those 1.2 level civilizations dare not make any rash moves. Li Ming's eyes continued to move, this time looking at Cottrell. HMPH. He snorted and his figure suddenly shook. The figure flashed. Li Ming was still in the same place the previous second, and he was approaching Cottrell the next second. Cottrell was not too scared, but his face was very solemn, and his teeth were clenched. Just when he was about to use some strange means, a black shadow suddenly flashed, and a dog-headed and masked alien appeared in front of Cottrell and punched Li Ming at the same time. Bang! Li Ming's fist collided with the man's fist. The energy between the two dispersed instantly, and the ground beneath their feet made crackling sounds. Cracks appeared one after another. Under the impact of the two people's energy, the cracks spread instantly. The crack was 1 foot long and wide, and in the middle of the fist fight between Li Ming and the dog-headed alien, it was like a crack separating the two. The crack extended for hundreds of meters, and even the entire conference building was split in half by the crack. Li Ming retracted his fist, and his figure gradually retreated from the air to the side of Tanjing. His face was slightly heavy, and his eyes were fixed on the dog-headed masked alien. He thought to himself, 1.4 level civilization, this person is. 1.4 level civilization belongs to the second interval, and its strength is far from comparable to the first interval. Even Li Ming's wisdom eyes cannot predict its attack. Li Ming can fight with it, which makes the other party a little surprised. The dog-headed masked alien looked at Li Ming for a while, but immediately snorted with disdain and whispered, "It seems it is still necessary for us to attend this meeting, Mr. Reynolds." The dog-headed masked alien raised his head slightly and looked at the sky. Li Ming also looked up and glanced at the sky. It was just a casual glance, and Li Ming's face became ugly again. Another figure in the sky was Reynolds. As soon as Reynolds appeared, the surrounding advanced civilizations were immediately excited. Reynolds was a high level from the inner system and the initiator of this morning's Star Peace Conference. The aliens who were still afraid of Li Ming suddenly felt relieved, as if they were relieved of a heavy burden. They looked at Li Ming with a smile and complacent look in their eyes. With the existence of this 1.4 level civilization, Li Ming could not be its opponent, even if he was powerful. At this time, Reynolds slowly floated down from the sky and came to the front of the conference building. His eyes first looked at the broken hole in the conference building. This big hole was caused by Nona being gently pushed by Li Ming just now. At this time, broken crystals continued to fall off in the depths of the hole, and a figure also emerged little by little. This figure swayed and slowly walked out. It was not until the entrance of the cave that her face was seen clearly. It was Nona. Reynolds glanced at Nona, whose body was covered with scars from the collision, and whose expression was slightly painful. "What's going on?" Reynolds asked in a low voice. Nona looked at Li Ming with resentment, and walked Reynolds' side step by step. She bowed slightly, and told him everything that had just happened. After listening to Nona's words, Reynolds' eyes immediately fell on Li Ming, but he just looked at him with contempt, and didn't care too much. He turned his eyes slightly and looked at the alien with a dog head mask and said, "Mysterious, is that so?" The alien with a dog head mask was the small Magellanic System Marshal Mysterious. After hearing what Reynolds said, he turned his head to look at Cottrell behind him. Cottrell nodded slightly and replied, "That's right. As Nona said, we have already negotiated. As for the man in front of us, he destroyed the logistics resources department of Maoyangsing and affected the progress of the laboratory. That's why I added this clause to the agreement, and the other party has agreed." Sturius nodded with satisfaction and turned his eyes to Reynolds. "Reynolds, the main content of the agreement of the Morning Star Conference has been determined, and the peace talks have entered the final stage. You and I are here at the right time," Sturius said lightly. After a little thought, Reynolds nodded slightly. Sturious eyes turned and looked at Li Ming not far away, saying disdainfully, "There are only two bodies left in this agreement. Will you do it? Or me?" Reynolds then looked at Li Ming, his eyes flashing with coldness. After a light snort, he said, "The conditions you proposed are also what we agreed to, so naturally I'm here." As he spoke, Reynolds slowly walked towards Li Ming. The powerful aura of the second zone spread out little by little with his steps. Every step was like a grenade exploding in his heart. Even Tanjing was startled and looked at Li Ming with fear. The blue flame on Li Ming's body continued to burn. He also felt the fear in Tanjing's heart. He suddenly waved his right hand, and the cloak behind him rose more than 2 meters high with the puff. This action made Reynolds stop suddenly. Li Ming's eyes stared at the people in front of him, especially those 1.2 and 1.1 level alliance leaders. Their smug faces at this moment once again ignited the anger in Li Ming's heart. He bent his body slightly, and a ball of green light appeared in the palm of his right hand, and then slapped it hard on the ground in front of him. The cloak behind him fluttered, and 5 beams of light shot out from it. These 5 beams flashed, and turned into 5 figures. The first was a grey cat, standing in front of Li Ming with a fierce look in his eyes. It was Walker. Next, on Li Ming's left, there is a large colorful bird, which is constantly combing its feathers. It is Mer, and there is a 7-tailed fox beast on Mer's back. On Li Ming's right, there is only a grey mist, which is the turbid beast, and there is a golden horn floating in the turbid beast, which is the magic horn golden fungus beast. There is sufficient energy in Li Ming's consciousness in Shanhei Hingayan Shang, which can provide them with continuous growth, mutation, and evolution. And this thing has been completely refined by Li Ming's consciousness. The turbid beast in it was just a clone at the beginning, but under Li Ming's cultivation, it has its own consciousness and has become an independent turbid beast. The magic horn golden fungus beast has naturally gone through a long growth. The golden fungus can not only infect beasts, but also civilized creatures. After summoning these, Li Ming's figure slowly stood up. With his mouth slightly opened, he said coldly, "To me, today is a day of wanton killing. For the 5 of you, there is only one goal, to protect that girl, and wait for me to send all those high-sounding guys to hell." Yes. The other 4 beasts, except Mo, responded strongly. Mo glanced at the other 4 beasts, and then ran to Walker with 2 claws. He patted Walker's back with his wings and said, "Do you think the combination of me and the fox beast is beautiful?" At such a critical moment, Walker just glanced at the other party coldly, without saying a word, and continued to look at the many aliens in front of him coldly. Seeing this, Mo could only make a sound of TSK. In disappointment, the powerful formation appeared, and the many aliens on the opposite side were also stunned. They may only know that Li Ming's methods are extraordinary, but they never thought that Li Ming has so many helpers. Li Ming then took 2 steps forward, looked directly at Reynolds, and said calmly, "No one can stop me from killing today. Some people must die. Now, let me tell you how to write the poem of peace." As he spoke, the aura on Li Ming's body began to spread in circles, and a green halo flashed on his right hand. Even with the existence of the second interval like Reynolds and Sturious, those 1.2 and 1.1 aliens could not help but feel terrified. If they want to kill Nona, Cottrell and others, they must first get rid of these 2 1.4 civilizations that suddenly arrived. Li Ming naturally has his own ideas, and his words and deeds are full of confidence. Sturious' face was slightly surprised. He took 2 steps forward lightly, crossed the previous crack on the ground, and came not far from Reynolds. He stared at Li Ming with his eyes and said, "It seems it's unlikely that you can handle it yourself." As he said so, his eyes under the mask suddenly flashed with cold light, and his body moved, and he took the lead in attacking, and rushed straight to Li Ming. But just as the other party launched the attack, Li Ming's right hand suddenly slowly raised up, and the action was like holding up something bit by bit. In an instant, the ground shook. As if there was a magnitude 10 earthquake, the ground shook wildly, and the previously cracked conference building tilted and fell down, and the dust crystals collapsed. Fortunately, the direction of the building's collapse was not this side. Many aliens were already unstable after the vibration, and everyone's expression was different, not knowing what happened. Just when everyone was wondering why, the next moment, bang 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 bursts of explosions came from the ground. It was like a bomb buried underground suddenly detonated, and a long vine grew out of each explosion point. The vine was like a giant snake, flying around and shuttling back and forth. As soon as it sprang out of the ground, any alien could become its target of attack, and these vines were also very different. Some had sharp thorns on the top, and some had a flower bud on the top, but this flower bud was like a big human mouth, revealing sharp teeth between opening and closing. The number of vines was huge and the speed was extremely fast. In just a few seconds, the entire building area was submerged by them. This building area was huge. After all, it was the headquarters of the Hawaii Alliance. But in just a moment, the bustling building area turned into a primeval forest. Every vine was attacking everywhere, and many buildings collapsed directly. Chapter 384, Different World, Elemental Life. The vines covering the entire building area were the artifact used by Li Ming, the Muxu Nirvana vine. This was the power of the artifact itself, not just picking a green bud from the Nirvana vine as before. The attack power of these vines was not ordinary stardust weapons, or flowing dust weapons. The power of the artifact was something that even advanced civilizations could not resist, even though this was just the tip of the iceberg. Faced with the sudden vines, all the aliens stood up and jumped away, using all their strength to resist the attack from the vines. In just a moment, the battle situation became chaotic, and the figures were scattered. Low-level soldiers died directly under the vines, and even ordinary first-level civilizations could not protect themselves. The power of the artifact was still beginning to show its edge. Although the vines were still rampant, Sterius had already locked onto Li Ming. The shaking of the earth did not seem to affect him. He looked at Li Ming indifferently and whispered, "Poems of peace." What a good tone. As soon as he finished speaking, he moved his body and his huge fist flew towards Li Ming like a meteor. The vines along the way were directly broken as soon as they touched him. While attacking Li Ming, he said, "Boy, do you think you can talk nonsense just by catching my punch?" The power of the primary artifact was still a little insufficient when facing the second interval without the support of the green buds. Li Ming snorted coldly and did not show any weakness. He flew up and met it directly. The clenched fist continued to release white light like a dazzling sun. Although there was a huge gap between the first and second intervals, they were ordinary aliens. Li Ming was naturally extraordinary. He originally had 3 times the energy of the same level civilization, plus the ability of the 6 domains to strengthen the star and the wisdom eye. This made Li Ming's strength surpass his peers at the basic level, not to mention the comprehensive strength. Sterius is a civilization of power. The entire fist is covered with a purple spherical halo, just like a purple basketball on the fist. When the purple light collided with Li Ming's white light, the confrontation between the energies had already emerged before the 2 fists collided. This collision was different from the previous one. It did not form a huge energy shockwave. It was as if the fists of the 2 people were covered by a balloon. After they collided with each other, there was a slight pop sound, and the energy on the fists exploded directly. Just like 2 balloons bursting, there was no big celestial phenomenon. But the powerful force also pushed the 2 people away. Li Ming and Sterius retreated to a distance, and their eyes showed surprise. As a 1.3 level civilization in the first interval, you do have some tricks, but I don't have any tricks at all. Sterius looked at Li Ming coldly and said coldly. Li Ming looked at the other party with a strange look. His expression did not change, but he thought to himself, this is the power of the second interval. Under the solemn expression, Li Ming was particularly cautious. The opponent's strength was indeed stronger than Li Ming imagined. The gap in strength between the second interval and the first interval was also fully reflected. However, Li Ming was not afraid. Instead, his fierce eyes revealed murderous intent. Reynolds, who was not far away, also saw the punches they just exchanged. His figure flew quickly and came to Li Ming's side. He looked at Li Ming again with a pair of eyes. To be able to fight against a 1.4 level civilization, it must be from the same interval. How could Li Ming's abnormal performance not attract attention? More importantly, the vines just now were also fierce and extraordinary. Based on these factors, Reynolds' eyes looking at Li Ming also changed. Reynolds looked relaxed, as if he had no intention of taking action. He said, as a first zone player, it is rare to have the strength to fight against the second zone. As soon as he said this, He first attracted the attention of Sirius. However, Li Ming glanced at him coldly without saying anything. Reynolds looked at the vines below, and then at the battle below. The beasts summoned by Li Ming also started fighting with the aliens around. These made Reynolds look at Li Ming again with a slightly changed look, and said, "Li Ming, I just heard Nona mention you. With your strength, you don't have to be our enemy." As soon as these words came out, Sirius's face changed immediately, and his sharp eyes turned to Reynolds, and he said coldly, "Reynolds, what do you mean by this?" Reynolds obviously had his own plans, but before he could say anything, Li Ming sneered. He turned his eyes and looked at Reynolds, saying, Are you trying to win me over?" Reynolds chuckled and said, "It's not that I'm trying to win me over, at most it's mutual cooperation." Li Ming looked contemptuous, snorted, and said, "Your ugly faces are really disgusting. There is only life and death between us, no other choice." Reynolds' face changed immediately, and then he said, "I saw that you have some means, and it would be a pity if you died. I didn't expect you to be an ungrateful guy." In this case, as a first level civilization in the first interval, Li Ming did not take Reynolds seriously at all. This has not happened since Reynolds became a second interval. Just now, he tried to persuade him with kind words, and was planning something else, but he was thrown a basin of cold water by Li Ming. This made Reynolds lose face, and his anger naturally rose sharply. As he spoke, Reynolds' right hand suddenly raised slightly. White arcs danced on the palm of his hand, and the rumbling thunder sounded continuously. It was extremely powerful lightning. Li Ming knew the power of lightning. After taking a quick look at the other party, he didn't pay much attention to it. His figure suddenly turned and flew to a vine not far away. At the same time, he waved his left hand, and a small green dragon flew out of his hand. It was Li Ming's flying dragon. The flying dragon flashed and disappeared, as if a green light suddenly disappeared. Li Ming looked at the two people in front of him intently, and thought to himself, "My target is not these two guys. I can only use that trick to hold them back first." Thinking of this, Li Ming's right hand suddenly pulled in the air in front of him, and the action opened a door. Along with this action, the light in front of Li Ming intertwined and flashed, and a huge character was formed under the weaving of light. This character was in a phantom state, just like a word written in the air with light. The whole color was blue. Although it was released by Li Ming himself did not recognize it. Not only Li Ming, but Reynolds and Sirius in the distance also looked confused, not knowing what the character meant. Li Ming looked at the blue characters in front of him and whispered, "The elemental summoning in the inherited star book is a civilization from another world. Feel it." As soon as he finished speaking, a face and a human figure suddenly appeared on the surface of the blue characters, and then a figure walked out of the characters little by little. The outline of the human figure became more and more obvious, and the light of the characters also shrank rapidly. From a distance, it seemed that the light of the characters was transforming into a vague figure. After a few seconds, the light of the characters disappeared, and a strange man more than 2 meters tall appeared in front of him. The whole body of this person was made up of blue light phantoms. Under the blue light, there was only an outline, and the detailed face could not be seen clearly. He also held this big knife in his right hand. As soon as it was formed, it released a pressing cold air. Even Li Ming felt this breath and his face changed, as if his body was about to be frozen. As soon as he saw the blue figure, Reynolds' face suddenly changed, his eyes widened slightly, and he said, "Elemental life." As soon as these words came out, Sirius immediately glanced at Reynolds. Although his expression was relatively calm, his shaking eyes revealed fear, and he said, "The third ranked life form in the universe is also a life form in another world, elemental life." Regarding the life system, advanced civilizations have basic cognition, from low to high. They are carbon-based life, silicon-based life, elemental life, stellar life, and electromagnetic life. Only carbon-based life and silicon-based life are known among the 5 major life forms, and powerful silicon-based life is already a very rare existence. As for the higher stellar life and electromagnetic life, they only exist in legends. From the perspective of the first level civilization, the most cognizable is silicon-based life, and elemental life is also a legendary life. As far as this cognition is concerned, elemental life only exists in another world. Among the current cosmic civilizations, the only one that can communicate with the other world is the summoning tribe of the intelligent civilization. Li Ming had practiced wormhole summoning before, but because his original star class was low level and incomplete, he could not achieve the summoning effect and could only summon wormholes to open the door to another world. However, the inherited star class that Li Ming was practicing was different. It was a high-level star class, and only the wise eye could practice it, and its abilities were extremely powerful. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 385, The Second Battlefield. The elemental summoning that Li Ming is using now is one of them. Through this summoning, elemental life from another world can be directly summoned to assist in the battle. The civilization level of this kind of life is naturally beyond Li Ming's imagination now, but the one summoned by Li Ming is not a complete body, which depends on the amount of energy in the body. The most important thing is that using this trick will consume the original energy in the body. Original energy is the life of every advanced civilized creature, just like the lifespan of human beings, which is not infinite, but advanced civilizations can strengthen it through external energy and achieve the effect of prolonging life. Therefore, for Li Ming, the trick of elemental summoning needs to be used with caution. Sterius looked at the blue light man and said, "The elemental life in front of us only has a rough outline, without a clear face. It seems to be a low-level elemental life. You and I will join forces, so there is no need to be afraid." Reynolds looked at the blue light man again, took a deep breath, turned his eyes to look at Li Ming's position, and said with surprise, "This guy can actually summon elemental life directly." Li Ming naturally saw the expressions of the two people, but he didn't care at the moment. He turned his body and jumped into the gap of the vines below. Seeing Li Ming leave, Reynolds and Sterius had no choice but to focus all their attention on the blue light man. There was only a faint light on the blue light man's face, and it was impossible to distinguish the organs on his face. All you could see was a blue halo that kept swimming, as if there was liquid flowing in it. Facing such a strong opponent, Reynolds and Sterius had to concentrate and deal with it carefully. After getting rid of the two men, Li Ming quickly rushed to another battlefield. Although his 5 pet beasts were not weak in combat power, they were still not enough to deal with multiple advanced civilizations. Moreover, among these advanced civilizations, there were not only two 1.3 level civilizations, but also high-level leaders of the two alliances. It was not something that a few beasts could deal with. The flying dragon that Li Ming released earlier was to understand the situation of the battle here, so he hurried over after getting rid of Reynolds and Sterius. His figure flashed quickly on the vines, like a flexible little animal. After a few jumps, Li Ming came to the broken wall of a building, looking down from a high place, and had a panoramic view of the situation of the entire building area. At this time, the building area was completely unrecognizable, and a large number of buildings became ruins and a mess. Flames and thick smoke were everywhere, and dense vines covered the entire area. These vines were of different thicknesses. The largest vine had a diameter of 5 or 6 meters, and the smallest was 1 or 2 meters. Flying vehicles could be seen everywhere in the low sky. The flames of war enveloped this place, and the diffused gunpowder smoke seemed to be experiencing an interstellar war. And these were all Li Ming's masterpieces. Not far ahead, a huge fog appeared, which was released by the turboed beast. There was a flying dragon released by Li Ming at that location, and it was also the place where Li Ming was going. He narrowed his eyes and looked carefully. The fog was surrounded by high-level aliens, but these aliens did not dare to enter the fog directly, but only attacked from the outer edge. Among Li Ming's 5 pets, only the turboed beast and walker were capable of fighting. The combat power of the other 3 could only serve as auxiliary. It was already very difficult to defend and fight. He turned his head slightly, and there was a constant rumbling sound in the sky in the distance behind him. The blue light man was already fighting with Reynolds and Sterius. Li Ming needed a quick victory at this moment. His eyes returned to the fog, and he flew over. Among these 5 beasts, the strongest one is the turboed beast. This beast was previously sealed by Li Ming's magic shield. Before entering Hingaianshan, it was just a clone of other turbid beasts. It had no independent consciousness and did not belong to Li Ming. But after a long period of erosion by Hingaianshan, this beast changed from a clone to an independent consciousness and possessed all the abilities of turbid beasts. However, its growth space is still huge. It is only in its early stage. However, it is a magic beast from another world and its strength should not be underestimated. In addition to these changes, Hingaianshan is full of Li Ming's consciousness, so this beast successfully surrendered to Li Ming. In addition to this beast, the second strongest one is Walker, but Walker is also just a growing star beast, and his strength at this time cannot reach the level of cooperating with Li Ming. As for the other 3 beasts, except for the young fox beast, the magic horned golden fungus beast and more are all auxiliary beasts, so their combat power is naturally not strong. The poisonous fog of the turbid beast and the golden fungus of the magic horned golden fungus beast forced the surrounding advanced civilizations not to approach easily and could only attack outside the fog. Even so, this put the 5 little beasts in a passive position. Nona looked at the mist coldly, then glanced at Cottrell and said, "Is there no choice but to wait outside like this?" Cottrell said with a confident look on his face, "There is no need to worry now. When the battle between Sterius and Reynolds is over, these beasts will be easy to capture. Even if that kid has supernatural abilities, he can't defeat 2 high-level civilizations in the second interval." As he said this, Cottrell smiled slightly and said, "The peace agreement has not been signed yet, but we can already cooperate closely. Isn't this a good start?" As Cottrell was talking, a figure suddenly flashed in the sky and came to the top of the mist. It was Li Ming. The sudden appearance of Li Ming made Cottrell, who was smiling just now, suddenly change his expression and even looked at Li Ming with some astonishment. "What's wrong with this guy?" Cottrell said in astonishment, and his eyes couldn't help but look further away. In the distant horizon, Reynolds and Sterius were fighting hard with a blue light man. Not only Cottrell, but all the aliens surrounding the poisonous fog were startled, as if their bodies would involuntarily take a step back. The fear made their hearts tremble, and they couldn't help but have the idea of running away. Nona looked at it fiercely at this time, and she was also incredible, but her eyes quickly swept over the other people and shouted, "We are all in the same area. We are in large numbers. There is nothing to be afraid of, just go together." As soon as the voice fell, this Nona actually raised her hand first, and a black light shot out from her arm. The black light arm was as thick as a black arc, and as soon as it left her hand, it flashed a black arc and rushed towards Li Ming. Li Ming did not move, and also waved his hand, and a golden arc flew out. The black light and the golden arc instantly merged in the air and exploded with a bang, as if 2 lightning bolts collided with each other. The energy between the 2 turned into starlight and scattered and disappeared in the air in a blink of an eye. Li Ming's eyes immediately locked on Nona. After Nona's words, and taking the lead in attacking, those who were originally timid became excited. They looked at each other and were really eager to try. Li Ming saw all this, and his expression was still calm. He raised his right hand and put a Liuan pill into his mouth and swallowed it while looking at the fog below. Li Ming's appearance diverted the attention of these people. The 5 pets in the fog naturally felt much less pressure. Taking Liuan pill was to prepare for the next battle. Noticing Li Ming's action of taking the pill, Cottrell's eyes turned slightly and suddenly said, "He is already taking the pill. Obviously, he is running out of energy. Hurry up." Cottrell shouted, but did not move. But after this shout, Quick behind him moved and took the lead. Kick belongs to the Power civilization, with a civilization level of 1.2, which is among the high level ones. As soon as he moved, he glared at Li Ming with his eyes. As his body flew, he stretched out his right hand, and a huge iron hammer was already in his hand. This iron hammer is a second level weapon of Liuchen. The hammer head is like a meteorite, uneven, and it is unknown what material it is made of. Its surface is surrounded by a faint light, which looks extraordinary. But Li Ming glanced at the other party with disdain. He had already hated these people in his heart. He snorted and pushed his right thumb in his pocket lightly, and there was a light sound of snap. A light red vine on the artifact Nirvana broke off, and his right hand was taken out of his pocket. There was already a red bud in the palm of his hand. Then he squeezed his palm hard, and the red bud disappeared. Pieces of red light spread along the surface of his right hand, covering the entire surface of Li Ming's body. In just a blink of an eye, Li Ming's entire body was wrapped in red light. This red light was not simply red, but also mixed with a hint of yellow. There were also some red and yellow lights that formed the shape of vine leaves and appeared on Li Ming's body surface. Chapter 386, The Taste of a Peaceful Hero. From a distance, it seemed as if Li Ming was a human figure transformed by red vines. In addition to the red and yellow light on his body, there were leaves that kept floating. Kik saw Li Ming's transformation, but his body was ready to attack and could not stop. He raised the sledgehammer above his head with both hands, aimed at Li Ming and smashed it, and shouted vigorously, "Ah!" Li Ming also looked absent-minded, with other targets in his eyes, and did not take this person into consideration at all. He pointed his right hand at this person, and flicked his finger lightly, and a red and yellow leaf flew out. The leaf looked like a maple leaf, and it was in a phantom state. The moment it popped out, it flashed and pierced through the opponent's body. Li Ming also flew away in a flash. The leaf pierced through Kik's chest, and Li Ming also brushed past him. Li Ming's body was almost synchronized with the speed of the leaf, but the leaf passed through his body, while Li Ming passed by him. After passing Quik's body, Li Ming took the leaf in his hand again, and flew straight towards Nona. At the same time, Quik, who was in the air, stopped for a moment, and his whole body was motionless like a sculpture. After a few seconds, Quik lowered his head slightly, and looked at his chest after the leaf pierced through it. At this time, the flesh in that place had begun to shrink and change color, as if the flesh had been drained. This was the case on the front and back of his chest. The guy who was originally strong, in just a moment, his expression twitched, his skin turned yellow, and layers of wrinkles quickly emerged. After a few seconds, Quik's body completely turned into the color of dead leaves, dark yellow wrinkles, and fell directly from the air. This made the faces of the others change drastically after seeing it. Before these people could react, Li Ming had already arrived in front of Nona, and the leaf in his hand flew out again. Nona saw Quik's fate with her own eyes. When she saw the leaf in Li Ming's hand, she couldn't help but be terrified, but it was too late. When he was about 10 meters away from Nona's body, Li Ming's figure suddenly disappeared. The next moment, Li Ming was standing beside Nona's shoulder. The two stood side by side, but Li Ming was facing the back of the other person. At this time, the maple leaf also entered her body directly. Nona's face twitched slightly, and her beating eyes seemed to realize something. She lowered her head slightly, and looked at her chest. She saw that the place where the leaf entered had begun to change, just like Quik. It feels good to be a hero of peace. Li Ming turned his head to look at the other person and whispered. At this time, Nona couldn't say a word. She only had a twitching expression and a look at Li Ming slowly. There was only despair in her eyes. Li Ming's figure flashed, and the eyeballs in his eyes turned, locking onto Cottrell. Cottrell's eyes suddenly tightened under the mask. His sharp eyes did not change, but the muscles around his eyes were already tense. Looking at Li Ming's flying figure, he suddenly waved his right hand, and a cloud of purple smoke flew out from his palm. The purple smoke continued to grow as soon as he made a move, turning into a purple cloud with a long tail, and it also had eyes and a mouth, like a huge ghost. The sudden appearance of the purple cloud made Li Ming's demeanor slightly change. Before Li Ming could react, the purple cloud opened its big mouth and swallowed Li Ming in one go. Li Ming only felt that his eyes suddenly became dim, and his figure was already in the purple cloud, but Li Ming did not stop and continued to fly quickly. In just a blink of an eye, Li Ming flew out of the purple cloud. At this time, the purple cloud circled behind Cottrell, slowly floating motionlessly, as if it was a soul summoned by Cottrell. Li Ming, who flew out of the purple cloud, also stopped in the air. His face changed slightly. The maple leaf that had been flying with him kept flashing, appearing, and disappearing, as if it was about to disappear. Even the red and yellow light on Li Ming's body weakened a lot. Seeing this, Li Ming's expression tightened, his eyes narrowed slightly, and he thought to himself, Niteng's energy was actually swallowed up. Cottrell, who was far away, looked at Li Ming's position quietly, his mouth slightly raised, and whispered, "It is indeed a light energy artifact. Fortunately, I have some research on artifacts, otherwise it would be really bad." Looking at Cottrell with narrowed eyes, Li Ming looked worried. On the 12 artifact lists, half of the artifacts are made with light energy as auxiliary energy, and the use of artifacts is to inject their own energy into them to activate the various abilities attached to the artifacts. This consumes a lot of energy. When Li Ming was a first level civilization, he was unable to overuse it because of insufficient energy. Now that his energy has been improved, it is naturally different. Therefore, Li Ming took a Liuan pill in advance before using it, just in case. But unexpectedly, this Cottrell actually possessed the means to restrain the artifact. Looking at the other party, the red light on Li Ming's body gradually faded. To deal with this guy is much more difficult than dealing with the second interval civilization. One is a duel of strength, and the other is more dependent on methods. Seeing the red light on Li Ming's body fade away, the high-level civilizations around him began to stir. Cottrell's eyes changed slightly at this time. He looked at Li Ming, then looked at the others, and said, "Why don't you do it? Now is the best opportunity." Li Ming's eyes turned, and looked at those high-level civilizations. These people were indeed approaching slowly, as if they were going to attack together. Li Ming didn't care too much. After looking at Cottrell, he said coldly, "Mayo, do you really think you can do anything to me? Tell me the method to remove the rainbow bone erosion, and I can let you go." Li Ming looked at the other party with contempt and said so. Cottrell did not reply immediately but chuckled. After a few seconds, he said, "Then use your eyes to see if I will tell you, or you can try to find out from my consciousness whether there is such a method." Li Ming had already used his wisdom eyes to see that the other party had no cognition about the rainbow bone in his mind. This was indeed very strange, which made Li Ming look puzzled. Cottrell continued, "There are too many mysteries in the universe waiting for us to discover. Blindly improving the level of civilization, but unable to obtain the cognition that matches it. What is the difference between that and those wild beasts? Let the cognition and civilization synchronize. Only in this way can we fully demonstrate the strength that a high-level civilized creature should have, don't you think?" Cottrell continued. Li Ming looked at the other party quietly, and various thoughts changed in his mind. He couldn't help but secretly said, "Yes. Mayo has already mastered the synthesis method of Rinxu, but he is still in the 1.3 level civilization. This TMD is unreasonable." Looking at the other party with his eyes, Li Ming felt that this person was not simple, but Li Ming's desire to kill the other party became stronger. Just as Li Ming was thinking, a figure suddenly flashed behind him, and a pure black alien swung a huge black blade and slashed directly at Li Ming. Li Ming's expression tightened, and he turned around and waved his hand. Bang! With a muffled sound, Li Ming grabbed the chopped black blade with his left hand. He looked at the alien again and said coldly, "Jija." Jija was slightly surprised at this time, but the black blade in his hand had been fixed, and he could neither cut it down nor take it back. He could only look at Li Ming with a strange look. Li Ming's left hand tightly grasped the black blade. Just when he was about to do something, the wind around him suddenly became stronger, and Zena's white longsword slashed at him. Li Ming loosened his hand and stepped back to avoid it, but as soon as he stepped back, another figure appeared behind him. This person stretched out his hand, as if he wanted to grab Li Ming. Instant light. Li Ming muttered a sentence in his mouth, and his figure disappeared directly on the spot. When Li Ming appeared again, he was already in the air farther away. The one who attacked Li Ming from behind was Tweak. With a cold look, he glanced at the men and said, "Okay, I'll deal with you first." As soon as he finished speaking, Li Ming suddenly clenched his right hand tightly, and a lightsaber appeared. He flew towards the three people again. After the three people looked at each other, they also ran towards Li Ming. His figure flashed, and the lightsaber flashed and changed in Li Ming's hand. Powerful energy instantly filled the air. Before the three people approached, Li Ming came to Tweak first, and a big hand suddenly stretched out from the green light phantom on his body and grabbed him. Chapter 387. Am I going to die? Tweak was about to attack, but when he was caught by the green hand, his body suddenly trembled, and his eyes became dull, as if he had lost his mind. At this moment, the lightsaber in Li Ming's hand had cut him in half, and Tweak's body was separated, and fell to the ground. This way, you can die without feeling, and without pain. Li Ming's cold voice seemed to be said to Tweak, but it seemed more like he was saying it to the other two. The figure stopped, and his eyes turned again, looking at Zenil and Jija. At this time, the two suddenly widened their eyes, and no longer thought about attacking. They turned around, and prepared to turn around and run away. Li Ming just looked at the backs of the two and said coldly, "How can you escape if I'm targeting you?" There was a flash of green light and white shadows, and the two suddenly had dull eyes, before they were far away from the spaceship, and then their bodies became stiff and unable to move. They were caught by Li Ming's green shadow hand, and Li Ming swung the lightsaber in his hand left and right, and the two fell to the ground. In just a few moments, the three high-level officials had all died under Li Ming's lightsaber, but Li Ming did not seem to have the intention to stop. He turned his eyes and looked at the others again. At this time, the high-level civilizations surrounding them were all terrified, and they had only one thought in their minds: escape. However, these thoughts could not escape Li Ming's eyes at all. With a flash of green light, Li Ming's figure flew again, using his powerful mental power to briefly control the opponent, and then killed him with one blow. This trick was enough to deal with all the people here. They originally planned to besiege Li Ming together, but in a blink of an eye, it became Li Ming's personal random killing. Wherever the lightsaber passed, no one survived. But after a few flashes, only 3 people could still stand in the air. One was Cottrell in the distance, and the other 2 were Yarborough and Biggs. Li Ming released his right hand, put away the lightsaber, and looked at Cottrell head on, but his eyes slightly turned to the side, looking at Yarborough and Biggs, and said, "The Milky Way needs the Huai Alliance and the Huff Alliance, but not peace heroes, because too many people have chosen to be peace heroes just now. You are not suitable. Get out of my sight." As soon as the voice fell, Yarborough looked at Biggs tremblingly, and Biggs looked at Li Ming with an unwilling face. They were evenly matched opponents in the past, but it didn't take long for them to survive by relying on each other's charity. Although unwilling and helpless, he still looked back at Yarborough. After the two looked at each other, he didn't forget to glance at Cottrell in the distance. After hesitating for a few seconds, he turned around and flew away. After confirming that the two really left, Li Ming began to approach Cottrell little by little. Staring at each other with his eyes fixed, he opened his mouth slightly and said, "It's time for us to settle this, Mr. Mayo." As he spoke, Li Ming's right hand had already been gently raised, and a golden arc of electricity was jumping in his palm. At this moment, in the distant sky, there was a sudden boom, a deafening sound, and a circle of blue energy aura spread out in all directions, and that direction was exactly where Reynolds and Sirius were. As soon as the sound entered his ears, the shock wave of energy diffusion followed, like a hurricane sweeping in, constantly blowing Li Ming's figure, and the cloak behind him kept fluttering. With his eyes narrowed, he looked at that position. The blue light man had disappeared, but the figures of Reynolds and Sirius were still there. The celestial phenomenon just now was the two of them working together to defeat the elemental life from another world, summoned by Li Ming with element summoning. Ha 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 ha. Elemental life, that's all, Sirius said after laughing a few times. Reynolds also had a smile on his face, and seemed to be extremely proud of defeating the elemental life just now. It felt like 2 low-level carbon-based life forms teamed up to kill the incarnation of a low-level silicon-based life form. Even though they didn't kill the life form itself, it was still a great feat in a lifetime of fighting. As the blue light faded away, Sirius' eyes turned and saw the position of Li Ming and Cottrell. His smile suddenly faded. He snorted coldly and said, "It turns out that this kid hasn't escaped yet." He gritted his teeth and said this, and then he flew over directly. Reynolds followed his gaze and saw where Li Ming was. He clenched his teeth and flew over quickly. Li Ming's face immediately darkened when he saw the two men. Before Li Ming could do anything, Cottrell sneered and said, "This time, you're dead." Li Ming ignored him and thought quickly. If he used the artifact netting, he could deal with the advanced civilization in the second interval. But when he looked at the purple cloud behind Cottrell, Li Ming's face became ugly again. But without the artifact, Li Ming had almost no chance of winning against these two 1.4 level civilizations. In this case, Li Ming had to come up with a plan to escape. But just as Li Ming hesitated, there was a rumble in the sky, and the two men had actually approached the airspace above Li Ming. At this time, the two men were like two hungry beasts, looking at Li Ming, as if they were looking at delicious food, and they wanted to swallow him in one bite. This naturally came from the anger in their hearts. Reynolds said nothing, and as soon as he arrived, he slapped his hand, and a bolt of lightning fell immediately. With a loud bang, the lightning struck Li Ming directly, with extraordinary speed and power. Although it was also lightning, the power of the second interval was naturally different from that of the first interval. Li Ming raised his hands, and the magic shield had already emerged, shining with golden light. The lightning scattered in all directions after hitting it, as if Li Ming was wrapped in an electric current. The sound of crackling kept ringing in his ears. After the lightning, Li Ming's magic shield was already trembling, with many cracks, and on the verge of collapse. Before Li Ming could react, Asterius's huge fist pressed down again, and he shouted, "Random fist." The magic shield, which was already on the verge of collapse, shattered directly under his fist, with a snap sound, like a piece of glass being broken. The lightning and the fist connected, and the two attacks seemed to be very tacit. The most important thing was that, because of the gap in the range, Li Ming could not sense the other party's thoughts, and his ability to predict the attack was naturally greatly weakened. With his eyes wide open, he clenched his right fist tightly, and aimed at Asterius. Bang! With a loud bang, the powerful forces collided together. Asterius smiled coldly, and before he retracted his right fist, his left fist attacked again. Li Ming was shocked, and did not dare to hesitate. He also waved his left hand to meet it. In an instant, a series of punches continued to attack like fast-firing bullets. This kind of continuous violent attack is naturally the attack characteristic of the Power civilization, and the attack force and energy of each punch have not decreased at all. Li Ming has never fought in such close combat. He could handle the first few punches, but as the opponent's speed increased, Li Ming was overwhelmed. In addition, the weakened predictive ability of the Wisdom Eye at this moment put Li Ming at a disadvantage. Bang! A burst of pain came, and Asterius's fist still hit Li Ming's chest. The strong force was like a bullet piercing through the body. Under the powerful thrust, Li Ming's body shot down like a bullet. Boom! With a loud bang, Li Ming fell into the fog below. Because of the thick fog, Asterius couldn't see the specific situation below, but he raised his mouth slightly and said, "The first section, that's the first section. Although there are some tricks, they are still too weak." At this moment, the ground deep in the fog has become a big pit. Li Ming is lying in the pit and can't move. There is a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. However, a ball of green light automatically appears on Li Ming's chest. It is Li Ming's healing ability, Ghost Key. The special feature of this ability is that it can automatically heal Li Ming. Close combat is a strength of the Power civilization, which is something that other civilizations cannot resist. If it is just one attack, Li Ming can completely take it hard with his own strong body and energy body, but this kind of fast and continuous attack trick is something that Li Ming cannot take hard. He kept panting, holding back the pain, and slightly raised his body, as if he was about to get up. But at this moment, the pain in his chest suddenly intensified, as if the organs in his body had ruptured, and the blood and ki rushed into his brain. His consciousness instantly became blurred, and his slightly raised body suddenly banged, and lay down again. At this moment, Li Ming's brain was blank, and his body's perception was weakened. He could no longer hear any sound, and his eyes became blurry. "Am I going to die?" This feeling. He was still thinking about this sentence a second ago, and the next moment Li Ming had gradually become silent, with only the consciousness in his brain, and his five senses with the outside world became increasingly blurred. At this moment, Li Ming's body suddenly floated up in parallel, as if being held by someone. Although he could not move, he could still sense the vague touch in his heart, which startled Li Ming, and he did not know why. A big face appeared in the mist, with only one eye, and it was Zilong. Zilong Beast used the energy of the mist to lift Li Ming up, and then moved in the mist until he put Li Ming down in a building. At this time, the other four beasts were also in the building. Chapter 388, Turning the Tide. Seeing Li Ming's injuries, Walker flew over and stared at Li Ming's chest with his brows furrowed. "It looks like his internal organs are also damaged," Walker whispered with a worried look on his face. Upon hearing that his internal organs were damaged, Moore suddenly rushed over, took a look at Li Ming's wounds, then looked at Walker's serious expression, and said, "Damaged internal organs? What do you mean?" Walker sighed slightly, hesitated for a moment, and said, "It means that the injury is very serious." Upon hearing that the injury was serious, Moore's face changed, and the fox beast next to him also cast a sad look. Even the magic horn golden fungus beast snuggled up to Li Ming and rubbed him twice. These beasts have absorbed Li Ming's consciousness, so they will naturally be sad and worried about Li Ming's experience. But at this moment, Moore's eyes turned slightly, and he suddenly raised his wings to hug Walker's neck, and took Walker to a remote place far away from Li Ming. He looked at Walker, then turned his head to look at Li Ming lying on the ground, hesitated for a moment, and said, "Brother, tell me honestly, can he be saved?" Walker's eyes flashed fiercely, and he raised his claws to push away the wings on his neck, and said solemnly, "The master is just seriously injured, and his life is not in danger." After saying this, Walker was ready to turn around and leave. Moore raised his wings again to pull Walker back, and said in a long voice, "Brother, I know you are loyal, but you have to see the situation clearly. The girl is half dead, and he is seriously injured. Before Moore finished speaking, Walker's face suddenly changed. His face was gloomy, his eyes flashed with cold light, and the sharp teeth in his mouth were exposed. Such a ferocious expression made Moore speechless. "What do you want to say?" Walker said in a cold voice. Moore looked embarrassed, and after hesitating for a few times, he said, "I mean, we can't say goodbye at this time. We should find a way to leave here." Walker retracted his teeth after hearing this, turned around, and said, "I hope you are telling the truth. Until now, I can't figure out why the master kept you by his side." After saying this, Walker had returned to Li Ming's side. Li Ming's consciousness was still there, but it was very vague. In addition, his injuries were too serious. It was impossible for him to continue fighting. He could only slowly heal his wounds. Walker looked at Li Ming's appearance, then looked at the other beasts. After hesitating for a few seconds, he said sternly with a tense expression, "If this goes on, we may all die. Why don't I lead the enemy away, and then you take the master away?" Walker said so, and prepared to turn around and walk outside. "Stupid." Before Walker took 2 steps, Moore suddenly roared angrily. This shout made Walker pause and look at Moore. Not only Walker, but also the little fox beast and the turbidity in the sky looked at Moore. Moore's eyes were stern, and he walked towards Li Ming with arrogant steps, saying as he walked, "Didn't you see who was outside? 2 1.4 level civilizations, and 1 1.3 level civilization. Even Li Ming can't deal with them. What can you do as a bald cat? It's undoubtedly suicide." At this point, Moore had come to Li Ming's side, looking at Li Ming with his eyes, and continued, "Even if the fog of the turbid beast will not last too long, there is only one way to leave here alive." As soon as he said this, the eyes of the other 4 beasts all turned to Moore. After Moore coughed lightly, he said, "The only way is to heal Li Ming's injuries and let him take us away." Upon hearing this answer, everyone was stunned, looking at Moore with wide eyes, and the atmosphere seemed to solidify, as if time had stopped at this moment, as if everyone was waiting for Moore's next words. But Moore just looked at Li Ming quietly without saying another word. At this time, the little fox beast raised his head, first looked at the other 3 beasts, then looked at Moore, thought for a moment, looked at Moore again, hesitated, and said, It seems that you didn't say this sentence." Suddenly, the other 3 beasts also reacted, but their eyes were still on Moore. Moore was at a loss, and after looking back at the other beasts, he said in surprise, "Why are you looking at me? Am I wrong?" Walker shook his head gently, sighed slightly, and continued to walk out, while the golden fungus beast and the turbid beast also sighed. Indeed, from the surface, what Moore said was completely reasonable, but after thinking about it carefully, it seemed that what Moore said was of no value. Seeing the expressions of these people, either embarrassed or indifferent, or even disdainful, Moore was immediately furious, and suddenly raised his right wing and said, "What are you looking at?" The 4 beasts were stunned again, and even Walker stopped again, turned his head, and looked at Moore without saying a word. Moore glanced at these people casually, then turned his gaze back to Li Ming. After hesitating for a moment, he said, "In the end, I took it all on my own." As he said this, Mer suddenly took a deep breath, and while holding his breath, he exerted force. His eyes widened, and his whole face turned red. Mer exerted force desperately, as if he was about to poop, and the other four beasts also opened their eyes wide, looking stunned. Mer continued to exert force, and did not forget to say, although, I'm not used to doing this in front of you, but for the sake of my life, I endure it. While exerting force, he spoke, and after more than 10 seconds, Mer's eyes suddenly widened again, as if his eyeballs were about to bulge out, and his right wing quickly put behind his buttocks, and his wide open eyeballs were already bloodshot. Finally, "It's out." He gritted his teeth and said, and then grabbed with his right wing, and took it in front of him. At this time, Mer's face was pale and extremely weak. When he opened his clenched wings, an egg-sized object appeared in his hand. This object was crystal clear, round, and flashing with starlight. There was steam on the surface, and there were some black residues and a few broken feathers on it. When the other four beasts saw this object, they were stunned, confused, and looked at each other from time to time. They didn't understand the intention. Mer ignored them, took a few deep breaths, opened his mouth, aimed at the egg on the wing, and blew gently to blow away the broken feathers on it, and then gently stroked it with the left wing, to stroke away the black residue. He behaved carefully, as if he was holding something precious. At this time, the eyes of the other four beasts were stunned, staring at the object in Mer's wings without blinking. Mer brought the object to Li Ming's mouth and said, "Come on, eat it while it's hot." As he said this, he put the egg-like thing into Li Ming's mouth. After doing all this, Mo breathed a sigh of relief, but this series of actions stunned everyone else. Mo swept these people, and was about to say something, when he suddenly fell down, and lay on Li Ming's body, as if he was exhausted. Seeing this, Walker quickly jumped forward, and helped Mo to his back, and then looked at Li Ming. At this time, Li Ming only felt a foreign object entering his mouth, and before he could react, it went down his throat. He didn't know what it was, but it had a bit of a bad smell. When Li Ming was about to do something, his body suddenly stopped. He felt that after this object entered his body, all the cells in his body seemed to be excited instantly. The pain disappeared, and his brain was particularly clear. The body that was originally unable to move because of the pain was now full of strength. His eyes, which were originally slightly open, immediately widened a little, and his body suddenly sat up. Li Ming sitting up made the four beasts around him startled and couldn't help but step back 2 steps. Li Ming glanced at them, then looked at the wound on his chest. The wound was still there, but the pain was gone, as if some force suddenly supported his body. Looking at the surrounding environment, Li Ming quickly stood up. Although he didn't know what happened to his body, he felt that his whole body was full of strength. He looked at the fog outside the building and said, "Let's go, leave here." The four beasts were at a loss, and they hadn't reacted at all. They could only stammer and reply, okay." Li Ming turned around and came to Tanjing, who was not far away. At this time, Tanjing's body was covered with the stripes again. Li Ming didn't think much about it, picked her up and carried her on his shoulders and turned around to the outside of the building. In the sky outside the fog, Sterius and Reynolds were approaching. Sterius glanced at Reynolds and said, "Destroy the entire fog." Reynolds said calmly, "If such a person stays in the world, he will only become a threat to you and me in the future, which is not conducive to building peace in the galaxy." Sterius nodded slightly, his mouth slightly raised, and whispered, "Then do it." As soon as the voice fell, Sterius clenched his palms gently, just preparing to use a powerful trick. At this moment, the fog below suddenly shrank rapidly, as if something was sucking the fog away. When this strange phenomenon appeared, Sterius was startled, slowly put away his right hand, and looked down with his eyes. As the smoke shrank, the vines on the ground also emerged little by little, and there was a figure standing on one of the vines. When Reynolds saw this figure, he couldn't help but widen his eyes a little, and said, "Is it him?" As soon as this sentence came out, Reynolds frowned again. Chapter 389, Special Person. As the fog narrowed, more and more figures emerged. These figures were all the same, all Li Ming, and they all carried Tanjing on their shoulders. When the fog completely disappeared, nearly 100 Li Mings appeared on the ground. Reynolds frowned, not knowing why, and occasionally looked at Sterius. But facing this situation, Sterius was also confused. Even the genius Master Cottrell couldn't help showing a puzzled expression. Just when the three were puzzled, the many Li Mings below suddenly dispersed and flew away. So many Li Mings are Li Ming's elemental clones. The ability of this clone comes from the inherited star. Its ability is to use its own energy to create another self with its own consciousness. With Li Ming's previous energy volume, at most he can only create one clone. This ability requires extremely high energy and mental strength, which naturally echoes Li Ming's multi-civilized physique, but even so Li Ming can only get one clone. But after taking the egg laid by Moore, the energy in Li Ming's body suddenly increased, which created so many clones in front of him, and each clone has a lot of energy. At present, nearly 100 Li Mings are scattered in all directions, and anyone would be stunned and not know what to do. What's going on? Sterius frowned and looked at Reynolds at the same time. Reynolds was also confused. His eyes turned around, looking at the Li Ming who was gradually scattered away. He couldn't help but snorted and said, "Chase." As soon as the voice fell, Reynolds flew down first and went straight to one of the Li Mings. Sterius looked helpless, but in anger, he could only chase down. Although so many Li Mings did not have strong combat power, they were more than enough to escape. These clones all contained a certain amount of energy, and some even used the ability to teleport directly. Once they started to flee in all directions, it would naturally be time consuming and laborious to catch them all. The real Li Ming had already fled far away, accompanied by many clones, many of whom entered the spaceships above the construction area. In a flash, those spaceships also started quickly and flew around. At this time, it was impossible to tell which one was the real Li Ming, let alone which one to chase. There were so many clones, and the only purpose was to leave Isaiah. At this time, the real Li Ming was already sitting in the main cabin of one of the spaceships, and gently put Tanjing on the ground. The spaceship had set random coordinates, and Li Ming took a deep breath. He looked at the operating table with his eyes, and there were no other spaceships chasing him. Li Ming sat back on the ground and thought to himself, "My body suddenly has so much energy, I should check it first." After confirming that the environment was safe, Li Ming closed his eyes slightly and began to check his body. Green light flashed on the surface of his body, and Li Ming was also carefully checking the condition of his body, as if a flying dragon was swimming in his body. After a while, Li Ming's eyes slowly opened, with a puzzled look on his face, and he said to himself, "Except for the wound, there is nothing abnormal. Why is that?" Li Ming didn't understand for a while, but he didn't think about it anymore. He hummed softly and stopped thinking about it. Regarding the sudden increase in energy and the rapid recovery of the body, Li Ming couldn't think of the details, but he still had some impression of the general situation. It felt like he swallowed a quick-acting tonic pill, and his body was strengthened and recovered in an instant. At present, everything in the body is the same as before, only the wound on the chest needs to be healed. The spacecraft automatically teleported in the starry universe, without a target, without a purpose, or randomly teleported, and Li Ming sat quietly, and his wounds were also recovering little by little. After an unknown period of time, Li Ming's injuries recovered a lot, and his complexion and expression also improved a lot. His eyes moved slightly, and he looked at Tanjing who was in a coma. After a slight sigh, his eyes turned to the operating table. At this time, a light spot flashed on the operating table. Li Ming then stood up, and came to the operating table, pointed his finger at the operating table and lightly tapped it, and the light spot immediately enlarged. He looked intently and whispered, "Panorama Bay? Where are we?" Li Ming gently moved his arm, and a blue light flashed on the console, and the starfield he was in also appeared. "New starfield. I'm actually here," Li Ming muttered, and his eyes continued to look at the console. Starfield is the name of a region in the Milky Way. Each starfield is divided according to the number of star systems and planets contained in this region. The Bunu starfield is a relatively remote starfield. The remoteness here does not refer to its location, but to the number of planets and resources. This starfield is also one of the largest starfields in the Milky Way. However, there is only one star system in the Bennu starfield, which is the Bennu starfield. Because there is only this one starfield, this starfield is named after it. There is only one star system in this starfield, and the area is empty, just like the desert on Earth, with scarce resources. Even if extraterrestrial aliens invade, they will not come here, and there will be no civilization living here in the Milky Way. Simply put, other star regions have a large number of star systems, wandering planets, etc., while this star region is larger than other star regions, but has only one star system, and even the wandering planets are pitifully few. It is not surprising that such a desolate place is called a desert in the universe. The most important thing is that once you enter this area, you will fall into a truly dark world, with nothing but darkness. Li Ming once got a space map from the Croft galaxy, so he had this in his mind, and now the location of Li Ming's spacecraft is near the edge of the star region. Li Ming looked at the operating table with his eyes, and his eyes first came to the cruise bay. Li Ming was not interested in the remote places like the Bennu star region, but he was somewhat interested in the cruise bay in front of him. He looked at it quietly with his eyes, raised his hand and lightly tapped the cruise bay, which was to determine the transmission target. This cruise bay is a spherical cruise bay, which Li Ming had seen before. As soon as he approached this area, Li Ming first confirmed the connection request, and the next operation was controlled by the cruise bay operation, and Li Ming only needed to wait. After a while, Li Ming's spaceship stopped steadily at the berth of the cruise bay. The docking was completed, and then a blue beam of light shone through the spaceship. This beam of light was the portal. Through this beam of light, you can directly enter the interior of the cruise bay. Li Ming looked at the beam of light with his eyes, and then looked at Tang Jing lying on the ground. After a slight sigh, he walked into the beam of light alone. After a flash of light, Li Ming's figure appeared again in a hall. There was a portal behind him, and an empty hall in front of him. There were relatively few aliens here, and the sparse flow of people was countable. The biggest function of the cruise bay is supply. Here you can buy materials, nearby safety coordinates, etc. Li Ming came here to trade materials. He looked around with his eyes, locked onto a corridor in front of him, and then walked over quickly. Through this corridor is the trading hall. Compared with the hall outside, there are relatively more aliens here. Most of them are low-level civilizations, and only a few high-level civilizations exist. In the trading hall, there are independent operating tables, and they are in a semi-enclosed state, just like ATMs. Li Ming came to an unmanned machine, and started to operate it. Li Ming still has a lot of view energy. Last time, he only refined 3 Luang pills. Because it was the eve of the war, many materials could not be collected. At this time, Li Ming could replenish it in the cruise bay. With both hands operating on the operating table, the information of the materials Li Ming needed also emerged. As long as it was related to Luang pill, Li Ming bought it all. After several operations, those materials were basically looted by Li Ming. After the purchase, Li Ming turned around and exited the machine to leave, but as Li Ming turned around, an alien passed by Li Ming. It was because of this that Li Ming looked at the other person more. Under his slightly narrowed eyes, Li Ming also roughly scanned the information in the person's brain, but just with such a casual look, Li Ming suddenly frowned. He couldn't help but continue to stare at the other person and watch carefully. The alien had brown-green skin and a strong body. Just like a standing gorilla, with black and red armor all over his body. His civilization level is only level 8, which belongs to the low-level civilization. Li Ming's eyes just swept, and various information was quickly obtained. One of them was very important. That is, this person's origin was related to the Pegasus galaxy. Among the large galaxies that attacked the Milky Way this time, the Pegasus galaxy was also one of them. It was not surprising that it appeared in the cruise bay, but this person was completely different. Because the information in the minds of those war personnel came from the recent time. After all, they had just arrived in the Milky Way not long after launching the war, so the information was also the latest, but the information in this person's mind was even older, far more than before the war. More importantly, the information in this person's mind was actually somewhat related to Cottrell. Looking at these with his eyes fixed, this person had gradually walked away. After Li Ming hesitated in place for a while, his eyes moved slightly, and then he followed. Chapter 390. Purpose of the transaction. Follow closely and get more information. This alien is named Welsh. His purpose of coming here is to purchase materials. Most of the materials he purchased are light medicine materials, but these are accessories of his trip. His main goal is special energy. The common energy is light energy, and special energy is other energy besides light energy, including mutant energy, dark energy, and U energy. Li Ming cannot find out the purpose of his purchase, because he is just a purchaser. The deeper information in his mind shows that he comes from the Pegasus galaxy and was once under the rule of Cottrell, but when he came to the Milky Way and the purpose of his coming here are not known. But when he saw Cottrell, Li Ming was still very interested. Welsh walked around the trading hall and finally stopped in front of an unmanned machine and started to buy items. Li Ming looked at the other party, his eyes turned slightly, and then he quickly came to another unmanned machine. This time, Li Ming did not intend to buy anything, but raised his hand to take out a mutant crystal, then put it in, and entered the selling information. After doing all this, Li Ming turned his eyes to Welsh's position, smiled slightly, and turned away. At this time, Welsh was still buying various materials on the machine. After buying these materials, Welsh was ready to turn around and leave, but he hesitated as soon as he turned around, as if he was thinking about something. After hesitating for a few seconds, he returned to the machine and raised his hand to operate it again. His expression was calm and his operation was casual. It seemed that he had no hope of finding what he was looking for. After a few clicks of his fingers, Welsh suddenly opened his eyes wide and couldn't help saying, "This is mutated crystal?" Welsh was stunned, his eyes wide open, and kept looking at the blue light screen on the machine. From time to time, he turned his head and looked around, as if he had found a treasure, and was afraid that others would fight for it. He quickly stretched out his right hand and pointed at the blue light. A message was then displayed on the screen. Looking at the message, Welsh whispered, "Trading room number 6. As he spoke, Welsh turned and left. This is another way of trading. Li Ming has come across it before. He pays a certain amount of Kanlini to list the items he wants to sell in the trading hall, and then waits for the potential buyers to come for an interview in the trading room, assigned by the system. Trading room number 6 is where Li Ming is. The trading room is not big, about 5 or 6 square meters, and it is an independent room. Li Ming sits in it and uses the flying dragon to suppress his energy to the first level civilization, then closes his eyes and waits quietly. After a while, the portal of the room flashes slightly, and Li Ming's eyes open and smiles slightly. At the portal, an alien walks in. It is Welsh. Li Ming smiles lightly and says directly, "You want to trade mutant crystals?" As soon as he sees Li Ming's first level civilization, Welsh bows his head, then nods lightly and says, "I don't know. What do you want to exchange?" Li Ming smiles, stares at the other party with his eyes, hesitates for a while, and says, "Sit down first. We will talk slowly." Welsh was startled when he heard this, and after hesitating for a while, he sat down according to Li Ming's instructions. As soon as the other party sat down, Li Ming gently flipped his right hand, took out a mutant crystal, and placed it on the table in front of him. Welsh immediately fixed his eyes, staring at the thumb-sized mutant crystal, and nodded gently while looking at it, and even showed a smile on his face. Li Ming said nothing, and flipped his right hand again, and a metal ball appeared in his palm. Although this object was made of metal, the surface was gleaming, and there was a constant release of energy. This object was the U energy. At the beginning, Li Ming took more than 40 from the bottom of the lake on Hangaya Star, and used 3 of them to make pills, so there were naturally many left on his body. With his right hand, he gently put it again, and placed the metal ball on the table. Welsh frowned at first, but when he looked carefully, his face changed drastically, and his eyes widened a little bit, looking at the metal ball on the table for a while, and then looking at Li Ming, with an expression of disbelief. Li Ming was calm and indifferent, smiling without saying a word. Welsh was looking at the 2 things on the table with his eyes rolling. He was thinking about something. His gaze moved back and forth between the mutant crystal and U energy. Finally, he said excitedly, "This U energy, U." Li Ming smiled faintly and said, "As long as the price is right, I don't mind selling it all." Welsh then nodded, hesitated for a moment, and asked, "Then what are you going to exchange?" Li Ming pretended to be thoughtful. After hesitating for a few seconds, he replied, "If we exchange for the power of flowing clouds, what price will you give?" Upon hearing the power of flowing clouds, Welsh's face immediately darkened, as if he had encountered some difficulties. After hesitating for a moment, he replied helplessly, "I have never traded with the power of flowing clouds. At my current level, I have not seen the power of flowing clouds yet." This statement makes sense. The other party belongs to a low-level civilization, and the power of flowing clouds is a product of a high-level civilization. In low-level civilizations, even Begi, which can synthesize the power of flowing clouds, is extremely rare. It is normal that the other party has not seen it. Of course Li Ming knew all this, and he shook his head in dissatisfaction, saying, "It seems that you are not suitable to trade with me. These things. I can only find another buyer." As he said this, Li Ming waved his right hand and collected the mutant crystals and energy on the table. His face became a little uglier. Welsh was stunned, and the whole person seemed to be in a daze, but he could do nothing. First of all, he could not produce the power of Liu Iron at all, and secondly, Li Ming showed the strength of a first-level civilization, which was beyond Welsh's reach. But Welsh did not leave. Instead, he pondered again. After a few seconds, he replied, "Then, is there no other way to trade? Other ways to trade?" Li Ming's stern expression suddenly smiled slightly, his eyes fixed on the other party, and said, "Other ways to trade? What are they?" Li Ming's question seemed to open another door for the other party. Welsh hurriedly said again, "We can trade other items." Li Ming was waiting for this sentence, but he pretended to be curious. After a chuckle, he replied, "Then tell me, what do you have, and see if you can exchange it for the special energy in my body." Welsh did not reply immediately, but hesitated for a while before replying, "It's like this, I can't make the decision on the transaction of this kind of thing. It requires our clan leader to decide, so I have to inform you of this matter in advance, and then I can reply to you." Li Ming nodded slowly, took a deep breath, and said, "Then you go and inform, but I have to remind you in advance that, if someone else offers a suitable price during this period, I will not keep it for you. My purpose is to sell things and trade, not to wait for any notification and reply." Li Ming spoke gently, but his words revealed his dissatisfaction with Welsh. Welsh was shocked and trembled, as if Li Ming's words had awakened him. He hesitated and slowly stood up, intending to leave to make a report. But before he could fully stand up, he sat back down again, his eyes narrowed, and said, "If that's the case, then you can follow me to our galaxy and talk to our clan leader, because this special energy is really important to us." Li Ming continued to look at the other party without saying a word, thinking about something in his deep eyes. Seeing this, Welsh immediately said again, "By the way, the energy consumed on this trip will also be paid by us. When we meet the clan leader, we can talk about the transaction again." Li Ming was still in deep thought. From the information he obtained, Welsh came from a star system in the Pegasus galaxy and belonged to a biological civilization. He had also had contact with Cottrell. It's just that from this low-level civilization's brain, it's still impossible to get more detailed information about Cottrell, so maybe there will be some gains after meeting the other party's patriarch. Cottrell is Mayo, and Mayo's death medicine alchemy star was developed in the Pegasus galaxy. Knowing more information will be more helpful to Li Ming in treating Tanjing. It is based on this that Li Ming told this low-level civilization so much. Chapter 391, You a Star. After saying so much, Li Ming finally nodded, smiled, and replied, "Okay, since you really want to buy it, I will accompany you." Welsh was overjoyed when he heard this, and stood up excitedly and said, "That's great, I will arrange the spaceship now." As he said this, Welsh turned around and left. "Wait." Li Ming suddenly called the other party, then stood up and said, "There is no need to prepare the spaceship. I have my own spaceship, you just need to lead the way." Welsh was stunned for a moment, but then nodded, and said nothing more. Next, it was a system docking of Li Ming's spaceship with Welsh's spaceship. Welsh guided Li Ming's spaceship to fly or transmit, and Li Ming only needed to wait in the main cabin of his spaceship. Returning to his own spaceship, the system docking was successful. Li Ming sat quietly in front of the operating table, staring at the operating table motionlessly. Then the spaceship driven by Welsh started and took Li Ming's spaceship away from the cruise bay. Staring at the control panel, Li Ming let his spaceship follow the other party, first flying away from the control area of the cruise bay, and then entering the transmission point. However, as the spaceship moved, Li Ming's face changed slightly. This direction, could it be the Bunu starfield? Li Ming's eyes widened slightly. Indeed, the direction that Welsh was heading to was the direction of the Bunu starfield, which still surprised Li Ming a little. He continued to look at the control panel. As Li Ming guessed, the direction that Welsh was heading to was the Bunu starfield. Li Ming's expression was a little surprised, and his mind was also full of associations. Because Li Ming had not obtained the place where he lived from the other party's brain before. Even if there was, it was only the general appearance of a planet, not involving such a large range of starfields, so it seemed a little surprised at the moment. After flying for a while, the two spaceships had entered the transmission point, and the light on the control panel flashed, and the transmission had already started. If it was another starfield, Li Ming might not even take a look, just wait to reach the destination. But the Bunu starfield was obviously different, a starfield where few planets appeared. There is a lot of unknown information in this starfield. First of all, the coordinates. In ordinary starfields, safe coordinates are required for transmission, so as to avoid collision and crash when the spacecraft is transmitted to the target place, because the safety of the target place is crucial for transmission. From the known information, there are not many planets, wandering planets, comets, or meteorites in the Bunu starfield, which should be more conducive to transmission. But you will find it when you really go deep into this area. It is pitch black all around. There are not many areas with pure black in the universe. Even distant stars will have light spots. What's more, there are many stars in the Milky Way, so there should be at least one light spot, just like looking up at the stars on the Earth. But there is really no light spot here. After several transmissions, the spacecraft went deep into the Bunu starfield, and Li Ming also observed carefully from the operating table. With his right hand supporting his chin, his eyes staring intently, he couldn't help whispering, could it be that the light will disappear here? Li Ming's self-talk is not unreasonable, because there is a substance that can absorb light, which makes the light unable to penetrate here, thus forming darkness in the area. That substance is dark matter. Li Ming is still unable to confirm his inference. It is also possible that there are substances beyond Li Ming's cognition in this starfield that block the light and form darkness. What exactly is the reason? Li Ming is not sure yet. This darkness makes transmission more difficult because there is no comparison, no reference, and the so-called coordinates do not seem to be applicable here. But even so, Welsh's spaceship still leads Li Ming's spaceship forward in an orderly manner, as if Welsh's spaceship can see the path, but Li Ming's spaceship cannot. After another transmission, a light spot quietly appeared. Being in the dark for a long time will inevitably make people feel uneasy. The sudden appearance of the light spot is like seeing the end of the darkness, which makes people happy, crazy, and excited. Li Ming immediately focused his attention on it and casually clicked on the operating table. A name immediately emerged, Bunu Galaxy. This is the only known star system in the Bunu starfield. Li Ming does not have much knowledge about this star system. Even if he has some knowledge, it is a planet information obtained from Welsh's brain. This planet is also the planet where Welsh lives, the star of the sun. Under Welsh's guidance, the spaceship was transported to the Bunu star system. This is a star system. The luminous point that Li Ming saw before was exactly this star. Now Li Ming's view of the stars here has changed. Because of the influence of the substances in the starfield, the propagation of light here is limited to a certain extent. It is very difficult to find this star. However, after the spaceship arrived at the star viewer, Li Ming still frowned. In his mind, the scene of Welsh's life emerged. There were no high-rise buildings where Welsh lived, only dazzling halos, like portals. But the surface of viewer was all bare rocks, and deserts could be seen occasionally, which was completely different from what Li Ming saw in the other party's mind. As his thoughts kept turning, Li Ming's expression became more complicated. He couldn't help but whisper, "It seems to be getting more and more interesting." The spaceship stopped in the space of the Ua star. Li Ming was also watching the entire surface of the Ua star from the console. At this time, the spaceship had stopped in space for a while and had not yet been transmitted to the Ua star. Li Ming looked at the planet in front of him, and he was a little anxious. Just as Li Ming was about to contact Welsh through the system to inquire about the situation, the entire spaceship suddenly made a buzzing sound. Bang! A muffled sound spread in his mind, and at this moment, Li Ming's eyes went black. In that less than a second, Li Ming couldn't see anything. After his eyes regained their sight, Li Ming frowned. At this time, the spaceship had already stopped stably, and at the same time, a blue light shone into the interior of the spaceship. Li Ming roughly glanced at the blue light, and his eyes couldn't help but look at Tanjing. After hesitating for a while, he walked towards the blue light. As soon as the body touched the blue light, it was like crossing a threshold and immediately came to another area. Li Ming was stunned, and his eyes narrowed slightly. At this time, Welsh was not far in front of him. Li Ming just glanced at him, and immediately looked around. This was a huge space, surrounded by darkness, and the spaceship was parked above his head. There was not only Li Ming's spaceship, but also a large number of spaceships parked here. It was a parking lot. But on the top of the many spaceships was not the sky, but a huge circular ripple. The ripple looked like a portal, with an irregular circle. The edge was a flowing arc, and the center was like the water surface. The flowing arc was relatively soft, as if the current was shuttling back and forth quickly. The central area was like looking from the bottom of the water to the water surface, translucent, and there were constant ripples flashing, like the undulating water surface. Li Ming was stunned by the picture and thought to himself, is this a giant portal? What he saw was indeed somewhat similar to what Li Ming had guessed, but the area was huge, with a length and width of hundreds of kilometers, as if this was the sky. Come with me. Li Ming was staring blankly when Welsh's voice came. Li Ming came back to his senses and looked at Welsh without saying a word. Welsh then turned and walked away. Li Ming followed him, not forgetting to look around. There was a black stone road under his feet, but it was emitting a faint light. The surrounding area was endless, as if it was another world. Li Ming was basically sure that the giant portal he had just seen was the entrance to this place, but he didn't know how the spaceship was directly teleported in. Following behind Welsh, after walking a short distance, Welsh's footsteps suddenly stopped. He raised his hand and pointed at the void. Suddenly, there was a flash of light in front of him, and a portal appeared. Welsh looked back at Li Ming and then entered it. Li Ming hesitated for a moment and walked in quickly. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 392, Executing General Fan. After a flash of light, Li Ming reappeared in a huge square. Above his head was a clear sky and sunshine, and all around were aliens walking back and forth. The street was divided into two layers. One layer was a vehicle flying close to the ground, and the other layer was a flying vehicle in the airspace above the street. The two layers of streets were vertical, one on the ground and the other in the air, and they did not affect each other. The buildings on both sides of the street were only about 10 stories high. As soon as this picture appeared, Li Ming was immediately stunned. His eyes could not help but look around, and he was even a little overwhelmed. This was the first time Li Ming had come into contact with such a world since entering the alien planet. Li Ming's own position was right in front of a wall, but this wall was in a virtual state, gray, as if it was made by a certain software in a computer, and a series of small numbers continued to appear on the wall. Behind him was a digital wall, and in front of him was a 2-meter wide road. This road was parallel to the wall. Wherever the wall extended, the road extended to. Looking from a high altitude, the wall on this path seemed to be the edge of this area. Welsh came to the roadside and pointed his finger at the air. The road surface suddenly flashed, and blue light intertwined from the ground. In a blink of an eye, the blue light drew a flying machine out of the air. The aircraft looked cool, with a faint light, and the whole was in a virtual state, like a ghost car. Welsh walked up to the car, and Li Ming followed without hesitation. The aircraft that looked like a virtual image was as real as a real object. This was a bit weird, but it was not uncommon for the virtual image to be presented in the real world. The virtual shadow barrier in other civilizations also had this effect. After the two got on, the aircraft started automatically, and after vertically rising to a certain height, it flew away with a whoosh. Sitting on the aircraft, Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly, looked around, and saw a little bit of abnormality through his wisdom eyes. The world in front of him, whether it was buildings or aircraft, even the sky or the ground, was not a real object, but it was not an energy barrier, but an existence beyond Li Ming's cognition. In Li Ming's eyes, these objects are most likely some kind of technological products, but what kind of system, scale, and mechanism are they? Li Ming still has no idea. As the aircraft flew, a huge building appeared in front of him. This building is different from all other buildings. First of all, this building is in a suspended state. The whole building is spherical, like a ball floating in the air. The ground below it is an empty square, and there are almost no buildings nearby. The whole sphere is light yellow, slightly glowing, and the surface is grid-like. Just like a piece of small squares. Each small square is more than 10 meters long and wide, so the whole spherical building is huge. The spaceship that Welsh and Li Ming took went straight to the building. Looking at this huge building, Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly and was secretly amazed in his heart. There is no doubt that the technological civilization in front of him is something Li Ming has never seen before. The aircraft came to a small square on the building, just like a bus stopped at a bus stop. The square lighted up slightly, and a door appeared. This door is not a portal, but the surface of the square is virtual. Welsh led Li Ming into the door. The first thing that appeared in front of them was a long corridor with flashing lights on the walls, just like walking in a passage paved with lights. Not long after walking a short distance, Welsh paused, turned around and lightly tapped the wall on the right. A door opened immediately, and Li Ming followed him into the room. He saw an alien operating a huge disc in the room. The disc was like an operating table, with flashing lights on it, drawing buildings and streets, even the ground and the sky, including the circular building model, where Li Ming was, as if it was a city. Li Ming narrowed his eyes and looked carefully. The edges of those buildings were all black walls and a path that existed with the walls. At this time, Li Ming was almost certain that the building area painted on the disc was the city in front of him. The alien was wearing a white armor, and even the cloak behind him was white. His hands were carefully operating a certain building on the disc. He was concentrating, and did not seem to notice the arrival of Li Ming and Welsh. Welsh took 2 steps forward and said, "General Fan, the person I told you about, is here." The white armored alien raised his head, looked at Li Ming, and then said apologetically, "Oh, hurry, sit here." Fan said as he directed Li Ming to another part of the room. There was nothing here originally, but as Fan approached, a stream of light flashed, and an oval table and several chairs appeared. Welsh came to Li Ming's side and whispered, "This is our executive General Fan, and the tribe leader Vera will be here soon." Li Ming nodded slightly and said nothing. Welsh then smiled at Fan and stepped away. Fan's face was similar to that of a human, with brown-green skin. He was the same species as Welsh, with long ears and a pointed nose. "Li Ming, is that right?" Fan smiled slightly on his playful face, and Li Ming looked at him quietly, with a calm demeanor and said nothing. Fan spread his hands unnaturally, hesitated for a moment, and said, "It's like this. Chief Vera has something to do and will arrive later, so I will chat with you first. Anything is fine." Li Ming looked at the other party with his eyes, and couldn't help but smile slightly, but still didn't speak. However, Li Ming's discerning eyes have already seen that, whether it was Welsh just now, or Fan in front of him, they had no ill will towards Li Ming, and they regarded Li Ming's arrival as a distinguished guest. The only thing that surprised Li Ming was that Fan was a technological civilization, a first-level civilization, but Welsh was a biological civilization, a low-level civilization. The simultaneous appearance of 2 civilizations was indeed a bit abnormal. Li Ming had only seen this situation on the planet Isaiah, because in terms of the development of civilization, it is almost impossible for two civilizations to exist on the same planet, because with the evolution and development of civilization, the survival of the fittest will also be reflected, and the powerful civilization will occupy the resources of the entire planet as much as possible, so the weak civilization will be squeezed out or even destroyed. From Li Ming's cognitive experience, basically there can only be one civilization on a planet. If there are multiple civilizations, they must gather together in the later stage, and then reach a certain consensus to survive. Fan looked at Li Ming, who was silent, and lightly tapped the air with his hand. Suddenly, a blue light flashed in the originally empty air, and a shadow group appeared. Do you understand technological civilization? Fan asked tentatively. Li Ming looked up at the shadow pattern in the air and replied, I know a little. As he spoke, the shadow pattern in the sky changed rapidly, and finally formed 7 spheres. Li Ming frowned slightly as he looked at the 7 spheres, not understanding their intention. He turned his eyes, and looked at Fan, and asked, this is? Fan smiled faintly and said, this is my division and analysis data of the current civilization. Of course, this is not a secret, but I hope more people know it. I have no other intentions, but I hope that people outside, that is, outside the Milky Way, or more people know it. Li Ming turned his eyes to Fan and smiled slightly. This guy named Fan was like a chatterbox who was happy to share and good at scientific research. As soon as they met, he couldn't wait to share his knowledge of technological civilization with Li Ming. Li Ming nodded and said, then I, an outsider, must listen carefully. Fan then stood up, smiled, and said, you will understand after reading this. Li Ming's eyes turned, and returned to the phantom illusion, but when he turned his eyes, Li Ming looked at the other party more. This guy named Fan was indeed slightly different. The most common picture in his mind was a picture of the civilized world. There was no intrigue from the outside world, just like a nerd. Fan stood up and pointed at the phantom map in the air, saying, there are 7 figures here. If each figure represents a civilization, it is the civilization we know now. As he spoke, the illusion began to change, and a little bit of characters also emerged. Looking at the illusion with his eyes, Li Ming's mind quickly sank into it. At this time, Li Ming's ears could no longer hear what Fan said, because all his mind was immersed in the illusion. Fan's words seemed to be just an empty mouth, without any sound. Chapter 393, Digital Technology World. Cyan represents spiritual civilization, blue represents wisdom civilization, red represents power civilization, green represents biological civilization, purple represents aerospace civilization, and black represents geocentric civilization. The color of each sphere represents a civilization, except for technological civilization. Compared with these civilizations, the sphere of technological civilization is colorful and all-encompassing. What made Li Ming completely immersed in it was the development data of these civilizations. According to the data presented in the illusion, the most existing civilizations are wisdom civilization and power civilization, followed by technological civilization. These are also the civilizations with the strongest combat power, which is the same as Li Ming's initial cognition, but the technological civilization here is different from the technological civilization expressed by Fan N. The information about technological civilization conveyed by Fan N is digital energy technology, while the technological civilization that Li Ming had seen before is machine intelligence, just like the branches of multiple tribes in the wisdom civilization. It looks normal on the surface, but it is full of details. When you look closely, there are only 2 ways for technological civilization to exist. One is in the embryonic state, and the other is extremely high-end existence, which are 2 extremes. The most important thing is that the technology of technological civilization is diffuse, involving many fields, but this civilization is also an alien, like an isolated civilization. Simply put, a true technological civilization will not form an alliance or cooperate with any civilization, but this is contrary to Li Ming's cognition, because most of the previous Huai alliance were power civilizations and technological civilizations. If the technological civilization described by the illusion is an advanced technological civilization, then what is in the Huai alliance? The illusion increases cognition and creates new questions. This is why Li Ming's mind is immersed in it, but it also reveals another cognitive point invisibly. The real technological civilization is contradictory and opposite to all other civilizations. After reading this, Li Ming's thoughts turned in his mind, as if he was thinking about something. At this time, Fan continued, only other civilizations that recognize technological civilization can stand on the same line together. Facing the vast and unknown universe, shouldn't technological civilization be the future? Li Ming frowned slightly when he heard it, and he couldn't help but say, the future. Fan smiled lightly and continued, I'll give you another way of thinking. Maybe you can understand it. As he spoke, Fan pointed to the void again. At this time, the illusion suddenly changed. The previous colored sphere had disappeared, leaving only the other 6 civilizations. At the same time, a new item had appeared. This new item is also divided into 6 pieces, corresponding to the 6 civilization spheres. Fan turned his eyes and looked at Li Ming, saying, do you know the 6 domain star clan? 6 domain star? Li Ming was suddenly startled and was also shocked in his heart. He hesitated for a while and nodded slightly. Fan continued, the 6 domain star clan is divided into 6 pieces. It has been 6 pieces since its birth, and it is tailor-made for the 6 major civilizations. The 6 domain star eye corresponds to the spiritual civilization. The 6 domain star Hukan corresponds to the wisdom civilization. The 6 domain star Hukan corresponds to the power civilization. The 6 domain star Hukan corresponds to the biological civilization. The 6 domain star Hukan corresponds to the space civilization. And the 6 domain star Hukan corresponds to the geocentric civilization. But, is there something missing in it? Fan said earnestly at last. Hearing Fan's last words, Li Ming's eyes suddenly widened a little and whispered, there is no technological civilization in it. Fan smiled and nodded slightly and sat back in his seat. At this time, Li Ming looked at the illusion again. These contents were somewhat the same as Li Ming's previous cognition. Mayo once said that the 6 domain star eyes were built for intelligent civilization, while the wisdom spirit was built for biological civilization. Based on this, Li Ming can be sure that Fan's analysis is indeed accurate, but this also makes Li Ming think about it. Just when Li Ming was about to say something else, a figure suddenly appeared at the door not far from the room, and a slender alien came out. As soon as this person appeared, he first looked at Li Ming and turned his eyes to look at the illusion in the void. However, his expression was still calm, and he didn't seem to care. He came to the seat next to Li Ming and sat down gently, smiled slightly, and said, it seems that our General Fan is telling you about his research results. Li Ming also smiled slightly and said nothing. Fan hurriedly said, this is our patriarch, Vera. Hearing this, Li Ming looked at the alien next to him more carefully. Vera also looked at Li Ming again with interest, smiled slightly, and said, okay, let's get back to the topic now. Li Ming immediately understood, waved his right hand, and a flash flashed from under his palm. His palm gently stroked the table, and 2 items appeared on the table. It was a mutant crystal and a metal ball containing U energy. Seeing these 2 things, Vera and Fan looked at each other and nodded slightly. At this time, Vera turned her eyes to Li Ming and said, what do you want to exchange? Li Ming was silent after hearing this, and his eyes moved slightly as he was thinking about something. Of course, Li Ming was not thinking about what to really exchange, but how to get information about Cottrell. Just as Li Ming was thinking to the extreme, Vera suddenly smiled and said, how about this? Let's experience our digital technology world first. As for what to choose as an exchange, you can talk about it after you see it. As she said so, Vera looked at Fan. Fan nodded slightly, then waved his arm. After this simple action, the 3 people and the table in front of them did not change at all, but the objects around the room suddenly disappeared. The scene switched instantly, like a slideshow. Li Ming was still sitting at the table, and Vera and Fan were also normal, but the original room had become another environment. There were buildings on both sides, and under the table was the middle of the street, with pedestrians constantly walking on the road. Fan said at this time, in the digital world, our lives will be synchronized with our imagination. It only takes a few seconds to build a building. As he spoke, Fan's finger lightly tapped, and a building immediately appeared on an empty space in the distance. Fan continued, as developers, we can do whatever we want and create our ideal world. As he said this, Fan started to operate again, changing the weather, creating digital people, digital aircraft, and everything can be changed at will. Li Ming was also stunned at this time. It felt like he was in a world that belonged to him completely, and anything could be changed at will. After doing all this, Fan waved his arm again, and the surrounding scene suddenly changed, as if the slide switched to the next one, and came to another new environment. This time, he came to an open space similar to a square. The ground was full of shiny slate bricks, neatly arranged, leading to the distance, and the sky was pitch black. No objects could be seen. Through the self-luminescence of the floor tiles, the eyes could see very far, but there was no end. Li Ming's eyes were focused, not knowing why, and he couldn't help but turn his eyes and look at Fan on the side. Fan smiled with satisfaction and lightly clicked, and rows of patterns appeared in the dark sky. These patterns were painted by light stripes and neatly arranged in the sky. The first row was the pattern of spaceships and warships, with strange shapes. All kinds of things. The second row was the appearance of robots. Although it was only drawn with lines, it was full of science fiction, and also in various shapes. The third row was ordinary humanoids, holding weapons and wearing armor, just like the army. Li Ming glanced at the patterns and was confused. But the next moment, Fan suddenly clicked again. A spaceship pattern fell from above. Once it left its original position, the pattern began to glow, and the lines flowed with each other, eventually transforming from a flat pattern into a three-dimensional spaceship. Fan then said, in our world of digital technology, everything is under control. We can produce as many combat troops as we need in an instant. Fan's fingers kept clicking as he spoke, and at this time, the soldier robots or spaceships transformed from a flat plane into a three-dimensional 3D spaceship with the light becoming real. Looking at these, Li Ming's eyes became dull. Chapter 394 The Past. A world that can be completely controlled by oneself is really shocking. Even Li Ming is yearning for this feeling of control. If it were just these digital technology buildings and equipment, it would not be so attractive, but there are many civilized creatures in this world. In other words, what he controls is not a completely virtual world, but a world where many lives exist. Li Ming has only heard of this kind of control in video games, but he didn't expect it to exist in alien civilizations. At this time, Fan waved his arm again, and the scene changed again. This change was different from the previous one. He came directly to a space. It was empty in all directions, but it was extremely bright. There were soft flowing electric currents everywhere, like small rivers. It was these electric currents that illuminated the surroundings. Fan continued, we are now in the brain of the digital world, system center. Everything we created before is running in an orderly manner under its control. Every object or digital life created knows its origin and what it should do. This is very wonderful. Li Ming narrowed his eyes and looked around. Under his wise eyes, the flowing electric current seemed to be a constant flow of information, entering Li Ming's brain little by little. After seeing this information, Li Ming frowned and took a deep breath. He looked at Fan and Vera with his eyes, thinking about something in his mind. This digital world is indeed fascinating, but this world still has certain limitations. In short, this is just a regional world. Not to mention for the universe, it is an insignificant place even for a planet. However, once you enter this world, it is equivalent to entering Fan's domain. The rules and world settings here will be under its control, but if you don't enter this world, the so-called digital technology will become meaningless. Then there is Vera. Vera is a biological civilization with light medicine ability. She was once under Cottrell's command. But why can't Li Ming see the way here? After so much information entered his mind, Li Ming needed time to digest it, but at this moment, Fan waved his arm again, and the surrounding environment changed, returning to the previous house. Li Ming was still thinking. Fan turned his head with a smile on his face, looked at Li Ming quietly, and said, this is the world of technological civilization, digital technology. Li Ming, do you see what you want? Li Ming did not speak, did not make a comment, just kept silent. Fan was not in a hurry. After a slight smile, he continued, such technology, we can completely build it on another planet. To be precise, we can build it on any planet, Li Ming, as long as you want. We can build a world for you. Think about it. Every planet in the universe is covered by this digital technology. Then the entire universe civilization, isn't it in our control? Fan continued. Li Ming was of course aware of this statement. If the digital world is distributed to all planets with civilized creatures, only one system is needed to fully control it. However, this is not an easy task, and it does not conform to Li Ming's view of the universe. The universe should be a place where all living things perform their duties and coexist. What is the meaning of such crazy rule? Therefore, Li Ming did not agree with this. But Li Ming did not refute it immediately. He just nodded slightly and turned his eyes to Vera. Digital technology is indeed subtle, but I may not be able to accept it immediately now. However, I can give you this mutant energy and you energy first, but I have two requests. Li Ming said lightly. Fan smiled and was naturally happy to hear that Li Ming recognized his digital technology. In addition, Li Ming agreed to hand over the two special energies to him, which naturally made him even more satisfied. Vera nodded slightly and said, just tell me what you want. Li Ming rolled his eyes, thought for a few seconds, and said, the first request is, I want to know all the information about Cottrell. When Cottrell was mentioned, the faces of the two changed slightly, and the eyes they looked at Li Ming also changed. Vera even stood up slowly. Seeing the abnormal behavior of the two, Li Ming was also a little surprised, but his expression did not change. At this time, Vera looked at Fan with a little doubt in her eyes, but after a few seconds, Vera smiled and said, why do you want to know Cottrell's information? How do you know that we have his information? Li Ming paused after hearing this, and then he understood what the two were thinking. But Li Ming was naturally calm. After shaking his head slightly, he said, although the Buno galaxy is relatively remote, you should have known that the three extragalactic galaxies jointly attacked the Milky Way. The leader of the Pegasus galaxy was Cottrell. My home planet was almost destroyed by him, so I have to know the origin of this person. The reason I asked you is that Fan just showed me your cutting-edge digital technology. I thought you would know a lot. Now it seems that I thought too much. Li Ming said slowly, his eyes looking back and forth at the two of them. Li Ming's remarks were just to hide the fact that he had the ability of spiritual civilization. After all, it would not be good for him to let the two know about this. Spiritual civilization has always been a love-hate existence for all major civilizations. What they love is that with this civilization as an aid, they can obtain a lot of key and real information invisibly. What they hate is that they may also be under its surveillance and have no secrets. Li Ming's remarks just now were reasonable. Fan nodded first. After all, this was also an affirmation of his own scientific and technological achievements. Although Vera had doubts, she did not ask in detail. She then turned her eyes to Fan and said, then share what we know with him. Although Vera said this, Li Ming's discerning eyes could see that their race originally came from the Pegasus galaxy. How could they not know Cottrell? It was clear that they were unwilling to reveal this identity. Li Ming pretended not to know and turned his eyes to Fan. As long as they began to recall these contents, even if they did not tell all of them, Li Ming could grasp them all. Fan also sighed slightly, raised his hand, and pointed at the void, and a large galaxy pattern had emerged, which was the Pegasus galaxy. Looking at the galaxy illusion, Fan said, according to the information we have, Cottrell himself is the highest civilization in the Pegasus galaxy. It can be said that this person rules the high and low level civilizations of the Pegasus galaxy. The Pegasus galaxy is a large galaxy dominated by biological civilization and technological civilization. Originally, everything was calm and normal, but many years ago, a biological civilization named Mayo broke into the galaxy. Because of the appearance of this person, the galaxy has been uneasy since then. Fan's voice began to deepen here, but when he opened his mouth to speak again, Li Ming had completely blocked his voice, because the other party's mind had begun to recall this picture. Li Ming only needed to observe with wisdom. As for the other party's story, it was naturally not as real as that memory. After Mayo arrived at the Pegasus galaxy, he immediately won Cottrell's appreciation with his genius ability. In addition, he was originally a biological civilization, which was very consistent with the future development of the entire Pegasus galaxy. But before long Mayo's vicious prototype became exposed, and various cruel experiments appeared. Just like the conversation between Mayo and Li Ming, the so-called creativity is invention, experimentation, growth, adventure, breaking rules, and making mistakes. All of these are perfectly experienced by Mayo, which has seriously disrupted the original ecological mechanism of the Pegasus galaxy. Cottrell has reprimanded Mayo many times, but to no avail. Although Mayo has made great contributions to Cottrell, not long after, a major piece of information spread among the star systems in the Pegasus galaxy. That is, Cottrell killed Mayo, and many people have seen Mayo's body. I thought all the nightmares were over, but unexpectedly, this is just the beginning. Chapter 395, Treatment. After killing Mayo, Cottrell began to change, and he was completely different from before, and began more brutal experiments. Compared with the previous experiments, when Mayo was alive, the new Cottrell was more unscrupulous, reckless, and openly set up experimental institutions, causing the Pegasus galaxy to fall into darkness, panic, and suffering. In order to get rid of this oppression, a large number of galactic civilizations began to flee the Pegasus galaxy. In order to survive, they had to abandon this former home. Fan and Vera in front of them were among the escapees. Of course, when Fan told these stories, he naturally would not reveal his identity of escape, but only told Li Ming about the content that had nothing to do with him. However, Li Ming had already seen through all this under his wisdom. And there is one thing that neither of them knew, that is, the current Cottrell is not the real Cottrell, but Mayo, and it was not Mayo who died at the beginning, but Cottrell. The reason why Mayo's body can be seen is because Mayo has a very successful experiment, which is to transfer the energy soul to other bodies. He just changed the body, but the inner world has not changed. Li Ming nodded with satisfaction after hearing these contents. He had basically mastered the whole story of Mayo. After getting this information, Li Ming looked very satisfied. At this time, Fan and Vera looked unhappy, probably because of the painful memories. After a few seconds, Vera came back to her senses, looked at Li Ming again, and said, "Tell me your second request." Li Ming also looked at the other party, hesitated for a few seconds before saying, "Cottrell has a kind of poison called rainbow bone erosion. I have a friend who is poisoned. I want to see. Is there any antidote here?" Rainbow bone erosion? Vera's face changed immediately, and she looked at Li Ming intently. The other party's strong reaction obviously recognized the poison. Li Ming remained calm, nodded slightly, and said nothing. Vera then fell into deep thought, and looked at Fan. She looked at Li Ming again, thought for a moment, and replied, "Rainbow bone erosion is one of Cottrell's brutal abilities. It is very difficult to cure. It depends on the severity of the poisoned person's injuries and the condition of the poisoned person. So it won't work if you don't bring the patient." Li Ming's eyes lit up after hearing this, as if Vera really had a way to save him. "I brought this person with me. He is on the spaceship I came from," Li Ming said quickly. "Oh." Vera was surprised. After hesitating for a while, she said, "Then bring him here. I'll take a look at his injuries first." Li Ming smiled immediately and replied, "Okay, I'll bring her here right away." Li Ming stood up and prepared to leave, but before Li Ming walked out of the room, Vera stood up first and said, "How about this? This is your first time in this digital world, and you may not be familiar with some places. Let Welsh lead the way for you, and bring him directly to my laboratory." Li Ming paused, but after hearing this, he nodded with satisfaction and replied, "That's better." As soon as he finished speaking, Li Ming left quickly. Under the leadership of Welsh, Li Ming and his aircraft came to the previous digital wall, and then returned to the spacecraft parking place. Welsh did not follow Li Ming into the spacecraft, but waited quietly outside. When Li Ming came out of the spacecraft, he was already carrying a person on his shoulders. Because Tanjing was lying on Li Ming's shoulder and had completely fainted, her face could not be seen clearly. It could only be seen that she was a girl. Back in the digital world, Welsh drove the aircraft to take Li Ming to another square of the spherical building, which was located at the bottom of the spherical building. After sending Li Ming to the door, Welsh left on his own. Li Ming carried Tanjing in the corridor. There was only one straight corridor here, and there was no other entrance, except the door at the end. After passing through this door, he came to a brand new space. As soon as he entered, Li Ming was shocked. There were no alchemy equipment or materials in this room as Li Ming imagined. On the contrary, there were some digital machines here. Just like an operating room, there were robots of different sizes standing everywhere on the ground, and there was also an operating table. Li Ming looked at these equipment and these environments and was stunned. It felt like he had walked into the operating room of a hospital. Put her here. Vera's figure suddenly appeared, pointed at the operating table with her finger, and said so. Li Ming walked over quickly and let Tanjing lie on it. This operating table was also unusual. It was not just a simple bed. It was round in shape, with ripples on the surface, like a pool of water. As soon as Tanjing was put on it, her body sank into the liquid, with only the tumor on her back exposed. Vera came closer and gently stroked Tanjing's back with her hand. Tanjing's clothes on her back were lifted up, and the red tumor reappeared. Vera stared at the tumor with an expressionless face, and pulled the air with her left hand. The action was like pulling something over. With this action, a machine emerged. The machine was more than 2 meters high, and had 6 mechanical arms. There was a round light on the top. As the machine was in place, the light on the top sank down, and shone on the tumor. Under the light, the internal situation of the tumor was clearly visible. Li Ming just watched quietly and said nothing. However, Li Ming could find out the internal situation of the tumor with his wisdom eyes without the help of equipment. At this time, under the light, the internal situation of the tumor was no different from what Li Ming saw with his wisdom eyes. The same symptoms. What Vera saw was completely different from what Li Ming saw. After staring at the tumor for a long time, her eyebrows tightened slightly, and her face showed a thoughtful look. Li Ming still watched quietly and said nothing. After a while, Vera left the operating table and came to Li Ming's side, saying, "The poison can't spread much, but it takes time to heal. You can let Fan arrange a place for you to live first, because it may take a long time." Li Ming nodded slightly, without saying anything, but his eyes occasionally looked at the unconscious Tanjing. Next, Li Ming was arranged to a new residence, a closed independent room. As for Tanjing's treatment, all Li Ming can do now is wait. The new room is also full of digital products, with all kinds of facilities. The only drawback is that there is no energy in these items, which is a bit of a flaw. There is nothing good about digital items. Unlike other civilizations, there are always some strange things that make people curious. These digital items are all the same, monotonous and boring. Li Ming sat down at the table in the room. His mind turned, and he suddenly thought of something. He turned his right hand, and the palm of his hand flashed with blue light, and then a metal box appeared. The surface of this metal box is full of runes, and there is a purple breath constantly overflowing from it, which is extremely weird. And this thing is exactly what Li Ming got from Cottrell's secret cave. According to Cottrell, the items in this box should be the Hukang star of the 6th domain Manxing. As for the method of opening the box, Li Ming had already obtained it from Cottrell's brain. His eyes turned slightly. After some recollection, Li Ming began to operate on the box. The method of opening this box is the same as the one Li Ming opened before. Just press the alien characters on the surface of the box in sequence. The operation of this box is relatively complicated. There are many characters that need to be pressed, and each character is on a different side of the box. Li Ming needs to turn the box over and over to find the characters. After a moment of operation, the whole box suddenly glows with purple light. The purple light seems to be corrosive, penetrating the metal box little by little. The originally airtight metal box gradually becomes transparent, as if it is melted away little by little. After more than 10 seconds, the box completely disappears, and a blue starstone appears in the air. The whole is dark blue, like a sapphire, a circle smaller than an egg, and irregular in shape. Li Ming's right hand gently raised, and the blue starstone then fell into his hand. Staring at the starstone with his eyes, Li Ming smiled. This is the star of Hukang of the 6 realms. He held it in front of his eyes with his palm, and kept staring at it. Chapter 396, Sudden Situation. With his wisdom eyes fully activated, Li Ming absorbed his consciousness into the star stone and began to cultivate its abilities. Hukan corresponds to intelligent civilization. Li Ming already possesses this civilization, so there is no problem. However, Li Ming is not sure how much help Hukan can provide to intelligent civilization. He will know everything after the cultivation is completed. Li Ming began to cultivate, and at this moment, a meeting on the Isaiah star was also opening. The door of the conference room was closed, and advanced civilizations from the 3 major galaxies in the Milky Way were waiting at the door. At this time, Biggs and Yaba roasted alone, and whispered to each other. Biggs, I heard that this meeting will incorporate the starfields of our 2 alliances into one starfield. You and I may be an alliance in the future. Yaba said to Biggs. Biggs also had a cold and gloomy expression on his face. He leaned against the wall with his eyes slightly closed. He said with an indifferent attitude, just leave it to you to manage. I'm not interested in those things. Yaburo was stunned when he heard this, but smiled embarrassedly and said, the merger of the 2 alliances is also a joint management by you and me. Besides, you are now the only senior executive in the Huff Alliance. I can't interfere. Biggs' eyes suddenly opened when he heard this. After a glance at Yarborough, he immediately turned his eyes to the distance, with an expression of thinking something else. After a moment, his eyes suddenly became sharp, and he said, I'm different from you. What you pursue is the protection of your people and the survival of the whole. What I pursue is personal honor. For you, Li Ming's mercy may be a blessing, but for me, it is a shame. Having said this, Biggs suddenly turned around and prepared to leave and continued, if this meeting does not involve any information related to Li Ming, then there is no need for me to participate. My goal is to defeat him one day in the future. Whispering in his mouth, the person has gradually gone away. Yaba stood there, staring in silence, even a little dazed. At this moment, a strong breath suddenly hit, and all the aliens around him tensed up, looking in a certain direction, and bowed their heads slightly. Yaba did not dare to hesitate, and also looked in that direction, and bowed his head. The people who came were the higher level people from the second interval of the 3 major galaxies in the Milky Way. There were a total of 6 figures, each arrogant, and walked straight to the door of the conference room. Cottrell was also among them, but at this time Cottrell could only be at the end of the crowd. But just as he was walking, Cottrell suddenly paused, turned his eyes slightly, and looked at Biggs who was leaving in the corridor. Although they just passed by, Cottrell looked at Biggs with interest and smiled slightly, and then continued to follow the people in front into the conference room. After these 6 people entered the conference room, other high-level aliens dared to follow them in. As Yaba was about to enter, he looked back at Biggs who was going away. There was no one in that direction. Yaba sighed slightly and then followed the others into the room. At this time, Biggs stood alone in the corner of the wall, looking up with deep eyes, and muttered to himself, Li Ming. Time passed little by little, and the huge galaxy war ended with peace talks. The 3 galaxies were officially incorporated into the Milky Way, the starfields were redivided, and resources were redistributed. A brand new pattern reappeared in the Milky Way, but at this time, Li Ming was still cultivating his star identity in his digital space. Li Ming had recorded all the star identity content in Hukan. Now what was left was the cultivation content. This kind of cultivation was the same as when Li Ming cultivated his wisdom eye before. The ability was directly related to Li Ming's civilization level. The higher the civilization level, the stronger the ability to cultivate. Li Ming's cultivation speed was naturally incomparable to ordinary people. It might take ordinary aliens several years to reach the realm, but Li Ming could complete it in a moment. As he continued to cultivate, some basic abilities of Hukan had emerged. The first was energy control. The power of intelligent civilization lies in the control of external energy. It can cool the wind and rain, control thunder and lightning, and various elemental energies are all offensive means of intelligent civilization. However, these means have certain limitations. If you practice the fire element, you can only use it as the main means, and you cannot use other element. Moreover, ordinary aliens need to practice exclusively, such as the division of tribes, element tribes, time and space tribes, etc. Regardless of which tribe, the core point of intelligent civilization is always to control energy outside the body. After having Hukong, there will be no such limitation. Li Ming has previously practiced the abilities of various intelligent civilizations, including element, time, and space, and magic, which will be more powerful. The previous learning of multiple tribal abilities at the same time is based on Li Ming's spiritual civilization. The ability to maximize these abilities is also to use the 6 domains to strengthen the star. But after having Hukong, it is completely different. Li Ming can not only learn all the abilities within the intelligent civilization, but also maximize its power and become a truly almighty intelligent civilization. Energy control, as the basic ability of Hukong star, its greatest utility is to enhance Li Ming's control over external energy. It is the foundation of intelligent civilization. With this foundation, other abilities can be maximized. This ability is also what Li Ming values the most. He puts all his mind into it, with only one goal, which is to cultivate this ability to the extreme. While Li Ming was practicing, the surrounding environment suddenly changed. The room, which was originally well equipped, began to change at this moment, just like when Li Ming was taken by Fan to view the digital world just now. The environment of the room changed like switching slides. This change startled Li Ming, and he opened his eyes suddenly, only to see that he was already in a dark space, with only the stone bricks under his feet shining slightly, as if he was illuminated by a spotlight alone. This change startled Li Ming, and he suddenly stood up. But at the same time Li Ming stood up, black light beams suddenly formed around his body, crisscrossing, and in the blink of an eye, a square cage was formed. And Li Ming was trapped in the cage. He looked around with his eyes, and his face changed slightly, as if he was thrown into prison. The whole space was dark, and there was no end in sight. Only Li Ming and the cage were illuminated by a faint light. Just when Li Ming was at a loss, a faint light appeared again not far away, and a figure was hung in the air by a black chain. After a quick look, Li Ming's face changed drastically, and he whispered, "Tanjing." Not far in front of Li Ming, Tanjing was still unconscious, and the rainbow bone pattern on her body had completely disappeared, but her hands were tied by chains, and hung in the air motionless. Li Ming narrowed his eyes, and began to look around, but he could not see anything in the darkness. He opened his mouth slightly, and said with some displeasure, "What do you mean by this?" As soon as the voice fell, a bright light flashed again not far away, and a figure had emerged. It was Vera. Vera was furious at this time. She looked at Li Ming, as if she was looking at a long-hated enemy, and said in a stern voice, "What do you mean? What's your relationship with Cottrell?" Li Ming did not answer directly, but his sharp eyes had already seen some strange information. After taking a deep breath, he said with a look of sudden realization, "I should have said before that Cottrell almost destroyed my home planet. He and I are naturally in an antagonistic relationship. Could it be that I would be his friend?" Huh. Vera snorted coldly, glanced at Tanjing who was hanging in the air, and said, "Then what's the matter with this person? Can you explain it?" Li Ming then looked at Tanjing, his expression still calm, and said, "I know that Tanjing was once Cottrell's subordinate, but that was only in the past. You should have seen that she was poisoned by the rainbow bone eroding poison. If I really had any relationship with Cottrell, why should I let her risk her life?" Vera still looked angry, and said coldly, "If I knew that the person to be saved was her, I would definitely not help you. Fortunately, I found it in time. Although I cured her iris bone, but this person must die." Li Ming's face darkened again, and he kept looking at the other party with narrowed eyes. Li Ming had seen through his wisdom eyes that the other party wanted to kill Tanjing. Tanjing was once one of Cottrell's 3 assistants. He also worked for Cottrell in the Pegasus Galaxy and killed many of Vera's people. Now that he saw Tanjing again, he naturally didn't want to let her go. Vera approached Li Ming little by little, until she was a few meters away from the cage. Chapter 397 Hatred and Insidiousness. A pair of cold eyes looked at Li Ming, and her eyes were full of anger. She said, "What is your purpose in coming to the Bunu star system?" Li Ming did not respond. He turned his eyes, and looked at Tanjing, and said, "I came here, just for a deal. I have given you what you want, and you have also done what I want. The whole deal should be a perfect end here. You let her go and I will take her away immediately. Let her go? Vera said coldly. Her face suddenly changed, and she said fiercely, neither of you can leave. Since you are friends with her, you are probably not a good person. This is the bottom prison of the digital world. Your lives will end here. After Vera finished speaking, she turned around and prepared to leave directly. Li Ming's eyes sank slightly, and his whole face seemed to become dark all of a sudden. His mouth opened slightly and said, "Wait." Two heavy words came out of Li Ming's mouth. The voice was full of anger and chill, which made people tremble slightly. Vera paused, stopped where she was, slowly turned around, and was about to say something, when Li Ming suddenly stretched out his hand, and a shadowy arm suddenly extended out, grabbing Vera's neck. At this moment, the originally square iron cages suddenly deformed, and the black light beams turned into black daggers, aiming at Li Ming, and were about to pierce Li Ming's body. Before these black blades could really stab, Li Ming's hand suddenly exerted force, and the blue shadow's palm also tightened, which made Vera's face suddenly change, as if her neck was about to be broken in an instant. Van. Vera shouted this name with a throat that was difficult to breathe, and raised her palm while shouting, signaling Van to stop. Van was in the main control room of the digital space at this time. Seeing Vera's painful expression, Van had to let go slightly. As Van let go, the black dagger surrounding Li Ming also moved away little by little, retreating to a place 1 meter away from Li Ming, but the black blade did not go away, still surrounding Li Ming. At this time, Tanjing, who was in the air with her hands tied, suddenly woke up. When she opened her eyes, she saw the confrontation between Li Ming and Vera, but because her hands were tied, she could only watch. Li Ming glanced and noticed Tanjing, who had woken up, but he didn't say a word, and his eyes returned to Vera. Let her go, Li Ming said coldly. After saying this, Tanjing was still hanging in the air, which made Li Ming a little unhappy. He said again word by word coldly, say it again. Let her go. While speaking, Li Ming's right hand exerted a little force, and Vera's body was lifted up, and she could only touch the ground with the toes of her feet. To see it, Vera had to be lifted off the ground. With a light bang sound, the chains that bound Tanjing's hands disappeared instantly, and Tanjing fell to the ground. Tanjing slowly got up from the ground. Before she could do anything, the black iron chain that had just disappeared suddenly flashed again, but this time the iron chain swung around and surrounded Tanjing in the middle like a ball of string. The chain did not bind Tanjing, but just surrounded her in the middle from a distance, forming a circular chain cage. Li Ming was even more dissatisfied with this. After sweeping his eyes around the darkness, he said coldly, Fanen, I just want to leave here. Let us go and no one will be in trouble. As soon as the voice fell, Fanen's voice came, saying, if you let Vera go, I will let that guy go. As for whether you can leave here, I can't guarantee it. If you want to do it, I can assure you that the girl will die before Vera. As this sentence was finished, the chain surrounding Tanjing suddenly turned, and the round chain immediately turned into a sharp blade. What surrounded Tanjing was no longer a chain cage, but a blade cage. Li Ming's face changed again when he saw this. Through Li Ming's understanding of the digital world, all changes here are under Fanen's control, which is very bad for Li Ming. Li Ming's eyebrows twitched slightly, and his eyes looked at Tanjing trapped in the blade cage. At this time, Tanjing was still in a weak period. Even though the poison energy of the rainbow bone erosion on her body had been released, she could not use energy at all. Li Ming was not in any advantage in the current situation, so it was still a bit dangerous. His thoughts turned quickly, and Li Ming said again, this is your territory, what do you have to worry about? As long as you promise to let me go, we cannot hurt each other. Fanen hesitated for a long time, as if he was hesitating about something. Seeing this, Li Ming continued, you release Tanjing first, and I will release Vera immediately, so that I can leave here safely, and we can definitely live in peace. After saying this, Fanen seemed to have made a decision and said, okay. As soon as he agreed, Li Ming immediately showed satisfaction, but Vera, who was not far away, looked unwilling, and her eyes looked fiercely into the depths of the darkness, as if she was extremely dissatisfied with the decision to let Li Ming go. The next moment, the black blades surrounding Tanjing suddenly disappeared with a bang. Li Ming saw this scene and looked at Tanjing with a satisfied smile. Without the siege of the black blade, Tanjing took 2 quick steps to Li Ming's front, and then, the black dagger surrounding Li Ming also disappeared with a bang. Li Ming looked into the depths of the darkness. Although he could not see Fan En's figure, Li Ming had already sensed the other party's sincerity. After hesitating for a few seconds, he pulled back with his right hand and took back the blue shadow arm. After doing this, Li Ming said again, "Now you can let me go." Fan En did not reply, only Vera coughed on the spot, but after 2 seconds, the darkness quickly swallowed Vera, which made Vera's figure disappear instantly. Li Ming's face showed a strange color, but he did not show much expression. And after a few seconds, Fan En's voice came, "Okay, now I will send you away." The voice was not loud, but every word seemed to burst out from the teeth. The vicious voice did not mean to let Li Ming go at all. As soon as the voice fell, a shadow suddenly flashed in the dark space around Li Ming, and countless black blade daggers gathered around him. Each black blade was only a foot long, but they were so dense that it seemed that all the dark places were filled with these black blades. When Li Ming heard that Fan's tone was wrong, he noticed something, but he didn't expect that this guy would really turn against him. In a hurry, golden smoke suddenly rose around Li Ming, and then a round golden sphere was formed. The surface of this sphere was hard, like an eggshell, and the inside was full of golden mist. Li Ming and Tanjing were both shrouded in it. This was Li Ming's magic shield. Although the magic shield had been formed, the black blade daggers around him still attacked quickly. He could only hear the sound of whoosh whoosh whoosh, and the black blades shot out like bullets just out of the gun barrel. A series of crackling sounds were heard. Facing Li Ming's golden magic shield, the black blade had no effect at all. But at this time, Li Ming was furious, and his eyes flashed with anger. He said coldly, "I thought you were an open-minded person, but I didn't expect you to be a sinister person." Fan ignored him, but seeing that the black blade could not do anything to the golden shield, he could not help but snorted coldly. With a movement of his hands, the environment in which Li Ming was in immediately changed. The original ground suddenly rolled like waves, as if it was softened all of a sudden, like the surface of water. However, after a few seconds, the soft ground suddenly began to glow and smoke, and suddenly turned into rolling magma. The high temperature instantly filled the entire space, as if the air was twisted by the roast. As soon as Li Ming felt the high temperature, he immediately took off into the air, but before he flew too high, the originally dark sky suddenly emitted a dark light. Looking up, Li Ming's face changed slightly. There was actually endless magma above his head, and it was constantly pressing down. Seeing this, Li Ming could no longer suppress his anger. He suddenly clenched his right hand tightly, and a blue halo formed on the surface of his fist, and his whole body flashed blue light. His eyes narrowed, his brows turned stern, and the fist in his right hand suddenly turned into a palm and raised above his head. In an instant, a blue vortex formed in the palm of his hand. Chapter 398. Wake up, Fan. The blue vortex was not big, only the size of Li Ming's palm, but it dragged long blue lines as it rotated, just like dragging a few blue silk threads. As the vortex formed, the magma above Li Ming's head and feet also began to rotate, and suddenly 2 huge magma vortices appeared. The 2 vortices were concave, and all the magma rotated, making the central area completely empty. Under such a vortex, Li Ming's head and feet were completely empty, and not affected by anything. Seeing this, Fan En frowned and looked surprised. He whispered, "Is this guy a fire element intelligent civilization?" As he said this, Fan En waved his arm again. After some operations, the rotating magma suddenly disappeared bit by bit, and the surrounding space returned to darkness. Seeing the magma disappear, Li Ming's right hand slowly dropped. The blue light vortex in the palm of his hand also disappeared bit by bit. He raised his eyes slightly and looked at the darkness in the distance, saying, "Fan En, stop it, I will let you live." Fan En said with an ashing expression, "In the space dominated by me, you can still say such words. Are you looking down on my digital technology?" Fan En suddenly got angry, as if Li Ming had poked him in the most taboo place. With his hands, he operated again, and the surrounding environment changed again. Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly, and the 1.3 level civilization aura burst out of his body. The aura was like a god descending, filling the surrounding space. But the surrounding space has also completed the switch. A violent gust of wind suddenly wrinkled, and a large amount of frost and snow were mixed in the storm, as if entering an extremely cold place. Li Ming didn't care. With a flip of his left hand, a green dragon had emerged. Then he waved it, and the green dragon shot out and disappeared in an instant. After doing this, Li Ming aimed his right hand in front of him and slapped it. Just a light slap, and a ball of blue light floated out. The blue light ball slowly flew away from Li Ming, and flew farther and farther, until it stopped several dozen meters away from Li Ming. Then the blizzard around it also changed direction and headed straight for the blue light ball. In just a moment, the blue light ball had become the center of the blizzard. The blizzard around it stopped blowing, but gathered quickly around the blue light ball, as if the blue light ball had an attraction that sucked all the ice and snow into it. Looking at this scene in front of him, Li Ming smiled and thought to himself, Wukong's energy control is indeed extraordinary. Li Ming could think like this because he had truly experienced the power of Wukong. The feeling of control was as if any element could be used for his own benefit, or that these external elements seemed to be part of his body. Casual, relaxed, and natural. The only thing missing was that the energy consumption was a little greater than before, but fortunately Li Ming's own energy volume was sufficient. Fan En was still stunned when he saw this scene, his mouth slightly open, a little unbelievable. This? How is it possible? What's wrong with this guy? Fan frowned slightly, his face looked a little ugly. He stared at Li Ming with his eyes, clenched his teeth tightly, and whispered again viciously, impossible. No one can escape control in my domain. As he said this, his arm suddenly swiped forward, and a blue light flashed, and the space where Li Ming was located changed again. The wind and snow stopped suddenly, and darkness enveloped again. Li Ming's expression did not change. He raised his hand to collect the blue light ball and looked coldly at the darkness in the distance. At this time, faint light began to appear in the distance around Li Ming's body. Li Ming immediately became cautious. He looked around and took in all the light. His brows frowned slightly. These lights became more and more, brighter and brighter, and approached Li Ming little by little. It was not until he was dozens of meters away from Li Ming that he could see clearly. Troops. Li Ming squinted his eyes and whispered. This time, it was the mighty troops, robots and fully armed soldiers who surrounded them, each holding a weapon to suppress from all directions. The number of troops was incalculable. There was no end in sight. They were densely packed everywhere. With Li Ming's ability, he naturally didn't need to take these troops seriously, but the number and the endless supply of troops made Li Ming look a little ugly. If the struggle continued, it would become a war of attrition, which was obviously very disadvantageous to Li Ming. Fan En looked at the situation and snorted, saying, this time, let's see what tricks you have. Although there was some worry, Li Ming's expression was still calm. The corners of his mouth inexplicably rose slightly, and he whispered, it should be almost there. As Li Ming said this, a green dragon was flying freely in the digital space. This green dragon was Li Ming's wisdom ability, the flying dragon. After a while of flying, a round energy ball appeared in front of the green dragon. This energy ball was more than 10 meters long and wide, with electric currents flashing everywhere inside. The white electric currents flowed back and forth inside like small rivers, and this was the energy control center of the entire digital world. The Azure Dragon moved and entered it. The Azure Dragon is no longer the same as before. As Li Ming's civilization level increases, the Azure Dragon's ability is also increasing bit by bit. When Li Ming was dealing with the silicon-based life giant for Hangyu Star before, he expanded the Azure Dragon's consciousness to disturb the giant's mind, but now it is different. The little Azure Dragon that flew out already has this ability. The Azure Dragon with Li Ming's powerful consciousness began to play a role in the energy center of the digital world. This energy center is like the brain of the digital world, controlling the order and any changes in the digital world. The entire digital world also depends on the energy center to maintain. When the Azure Dragon entered it, Li Ming was completely relieved. He smiled slightly and looked at the approaching troops without fear. At this time, the troops stopped and raised their weapons to aim at Li Ming. Tanjing shrank slightly when she saw this scene. With such a large number, even if each attack was not strong, this base number was terrifying. But Li Ming's expression was indifferent, and his eyes widened slightly. Fan still looked at him with contempt, but at this moment, the digital troops suddenly flashed, the light dimmed, and the weapons they raised were put down, which made Fan startled. Li Ming's golden magic shield gradually faded and disappeared, and his true body appeared. He looked coldly at the darkness, and waved his hand gently downward. The darkness suddenly became brighter, and Fan, who was still in the control room, was shocked. Then the environment around him suddenly changed. The control room was slid across like a slide, and then a piece of open space appeared. Fan didn't understand why, so he looked up and looked around, but as the surrounding environment changed, Fan actually came to Li Ming. What's going on? Fan continued to look around, but the reality could not be changed. However, Fan did not give up. He waved his hands again, intending to control the digital world, but all the commands had failed, as if the world had changed hands and got rid of his control. Don't bother, your digital world is now controlled by me. Li Ming looked at the other party quietly and said with a smile. Fan's eyes widened a little when he heard this, and he slowly stopped his hand movements, opened his mouth slightly, and said, "Impossible. How can you control my digital world?" After saying this, Fan quickly waved his hands again, with an unwilling expression, hoping to continue to regain control of the digital world. Li Ming saw the other party's crazy look, shook his head slightly, and said 2 words, "Stupid." Fan paused after hearing this, and looked at Li Ming with surprise. Li Ming was naturally calm, with a smile on his face, and said, "Your digital world is full of loopholes and flaws. Once the energy center is controlled, the whole world will change hands. Have you ever thought about this? For a region, it is indeed powerful enough and shocking enough, but it is always too fragile. How can the virtual world fight against the cruel reality?" Li Ming said as he came to the other party little by little, looked at the other party with indifference, and continued, "Wake up, Fan. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels." Chapter 399 Dark Nebula. He raised his right hand high, and then swung it downwards, as if he was pulling something down. With this action, the surroundings suddenly became dark, as if Li Ming had turned off the switch here. This action immediately affected the entire digital world. The original buildings, roads, and various facilities disappeared little by little like a light being turned off. The environment where Li Ming was also began to change. The original floor tiles under his feet rippled a little bit, just like the tide receding. The digital ground gradually disappeared, replaced by an uneven rocky ground. The darkness of the sky became bright, and the dark light descended from the top of his head. The so-called endless darkness was just a stone wall cave ceiling. The darkness around was also degenerating. The digital world was disappearing, and reality was slowly emerging. Looking around at this time, this was actually a huge cave interior, and Li Ming could also see his spaceship berth in the distance. Above the spaceship, there was a bright light. The previous transmission port was the entrance of this cave. Seeing these changes, Li Ming took 2 steps forward again, came to Fan, and said, "I gave you a chance, but you insisted on doing it your own way." As he spoke, Li Ming's right hand slowly raised up. But just as Li Ming was about to take action, his eyes suddenly turned slightly, looked to the left, and then to the right, and a large number of aliens appeared on both sides of Li Ming. Most of these aliens were low-level aliens, just like ordinary people and residents. Everyone's face was a bit pleading, and their eyes were full of hope. They looked at Fan, and then at Li Ming, and Li Ming only took a rough glance to see through the thoughts of these people. These people were all aliens from the Pegasus galaxy who had fled here with Fan and Vera. Li Ming could still remember Cottrell's violence. At this time, looking at these people was like looking at a group of refugees eager to survive. Although Fan wanted to kill Li Ming, it was also based on his hatred for Cottrell, and these people were innocent. Fan's digital technology also created a high quality life for the residents here in a certain sense. With his mind full of thoughts, Li Ming finally slowly retracted his right hand. If you have anger and hatred, you should target Cottrell, not the people around him, because everyone is a victim. Today I will let you go. As he said this, Li Ming's eyes turned, and he glanced at the low-level residents around him, then turned and walked away. Seeing Li Ming's departure, these low-level residents turned their eyes back to Fan, and Fan opened his eyes slightly, his expression dazed. Looking at the simple faces of the residents, his eyes couldn't help but look at Li Ming, who had already walked away. At this time, Li Ming had come to the bottom of his spaceship. With a slight wave of his right hand, a green light shot out from his hand and hit the spaceship. The spaceship trembled slightly and shot down a blue beam. The beam completely enveloped Li Ming, and his figure followed the beam upward little by little until he disappeared into the spaceship. Returning to the spaceship, Li Ming lightly tapped the operating table in the main cabin, and the spaceship quickly lifted and took off, rushing out of the high hole. Flying away from the cave in trance, the real surface of the UA star is in full view. The surface of the UA star is all desert hills, and the temperature is extremely high, which is not suitable for living, but the environment in the underground cave is mild. Li Ming just glanced casually and immediately started the spacecraft's transmission system. After a hum sound, the spacecraft re-entered space. Looking at the operating table in front of him, Li Ming prepared to return to the cruise bay. According to the coordinates recorded by the spacecraft by default when coming, he began to return to the original route. After setting these, Li Ming turned around and looked at Tanjing. Without the red stripes, Tanjing's white face looked extremely comfortable, but the other party always looked indifferent, which made Li Ming look very awkward, as if the other party was always high and inviolable. After Li Ming looked at it for a few times, he flipped his right hand, took out a Liuan pill, raised his hand, and threw it over. Tanjing sensed the object thrown by Li Ming and took it. When she opened her little hand, it was a Liuan pill. After looking at Li Ming, he put it directly into his mouth and swallowed it, but still said nothing. Li Ming ignored him and found a place to sit quietly. He closed his eyes slightly and began to recall the 6-domain star Hukan he had learned before. The spaceship continued to transmit. Li Ming and Tanjing were silent, like strangers, but they also closed their eyes and concentrated, and their hearts were busy. The transmission continued here, but on the star Isaiah, a team was ready to go. A huge spaceship was quietly parked in the air. The huge spaceship almost blocked the entire sky, and right below the spaceship, 6 figures were standing on a round crystal platform. Among them, the commander of the large Magellanic Galaxy, Simandl, and a high-level commander of the Milky Way, Li, stood together. Opposite them stood Sterius and Reynolds, and behind them stood Cottrell and Ale. Ale is also a 1.4 civilization, the second zone, and belongs to the inner higher level of the Milky Way. Although she is also an alien, her appearance is somewhat different from others. She is only a little over 1 meter tall, thin, and covered with fur. She has 2 long ears, but she looks a bit like a rabbit. She is not wearing armor, but other fur clothes. Li looked at the 4 people in front of him and said, "This time you are going on behalf of our integrated galaxy. The journey is long, but the task is arduous. I hope you can successfully complete this task." Reynolds nodded first and replied, "With us going, this matter will surely be no problem." Li nodded with satisfaction. He turned his eyes and looked at Simandl beside him and asked, "Is there anything else Commander Simandl want to tell you?" Simandl's sharp eyes first looked at Sterius, then glanced at Cottrell, and said lightly, "I have nothing to say about the mission of this trip. After all, it is an emergency. However, I hope that Commander Sterius will assist Cottrell more after arriving at the destination. You understand?" At the end, Simandl's eyes finally stopped on Sterius. As soon as Sterius saw his eyes, he immediately understood the other party's intention. He smiled slightly and said, "Of course there is no problem with this." While speaking, his eyes gently turned to the corners of his eyes and looked at Cottrell. After hearing this answer, Simandl nodded with satisfaction. At this time, Li continued, "This matter is an emergency. After it is properly handled, you must not forget that the Milky Way is your home." "Yes." The 4 people then replied in unison. Li nodded and said, "Let's go." As soon as the voice fell, the 4 people turned and walked away. Then the giant spaceship in the sky made a squeaking sound, and beams of light shot down from the spaceship. These beams of light were blue and of varying thickness. They were the transmission ladders. The beams of light shot down from different positions of the spaceship. The position in the middle was Reynolds and Sirius, and most of the other beams of light were low-level soldiers. In addition to those soldiers, there were some advanced civilizations, but these advanced civilizations were only level 1 civilizations and level 1.1 civilizations, among which Biggs was prominently listed. Under the effect of the beam, these people slowly ascended into the air and entered the huge circular spaceship in the sky. At this moment, Li Ming's spaceship was still floating in the Bunu starfield. The transmission had stopped, and the spaceship was like a lone boat in the sea. In the main cabin, Li Ming frowned and looked at the operating table with a puzzled look on his face, and whispered, "Why did the coordinates disappear?" As Li Ming saw, the coordinates leading to the outside of the Bunu starfield had disappeared. This coordinate sequence was recorded by default when Li Ming's spaceship entered the starfield. Li Ming originally planned to return to the cruise bay according to this record. However, the coordinates disappeared after a while of transmission. To be precise, the coordinates originally recorded had changed when returning and could not be transmitted. Li Ming stared at the operating table, stroked his chin with one hand, looked puzzled, and made a hissing sound, saying, "It shouldn't be." Just when Li Ming didn't know what was going on, Tanjing took 2 steps forward to the operating table and said, "This is all Dark Nebula. It's normal that you can't find the coordinates." Dark Nebula? Li Ming was shocked. First of all, nebulae are one of the celestial bodies composed of rarefied gas or dust. They contain almost all extended celestial bodies, except planets and comets. Their main components are hydrogen, followed by nitrogen, and also contain a certain proportion of metal element and non-metal element. Dark nebulae are more complicated. They do not emit light themselves, and the dark matter in them also absorbs light, which makes entering their domain like entering a thick fog, and you will lose your direction and route. Chapter 400, Wandering Planet. Li Ming could see clearly from the console. It was dark all around him, as if he was blindfolded. It was impossible to teleport at this time, and he could only rely on flying. Tanjing looked at the console, turned around and sat down in his original position, saying, "To leave this starfield now, we can only rely on the power of the spacecraft and good luck." Li Ming looked at the other party, and soon returned to the console, and began to think about something in his mind. He gently stretched out his right hand, and a green light shot into it. Now the spacecraft will be completely controlled by Li Ming's consciousness. Li Ming does not want to be trapped in the Bunu starfield like this, so it is necessary to leave. In the dark starfield, flying slowly, the entire spacecraft seems to be Li Ming's body, and the radar is Li Ming's eyes. It is naturally necessary to determine a direction and fly quickly. At this time, Li Ming seemed to be a child who lost his way in the jungle. In addition to helplessness, he was worried. Operating the spacecraft to fly in space, just when Li Ming was confused, a huge dark side appeared, and it seemed that something suddenly approached in the darkness. Li Ming quickly slowed down his flight speed, staring at the console. The huge and dark object turned out to be a planet. Li Ming frowned and whispered, "This is." Hearing Li Ming's surprised voice, Tanjing also came forward. When he saw the picture on the console, his handsome face changed. On the console, a huge planet appeared. The whole planet was black, like a piece of black coal. In this dark starfield, no one would find it. Li Ming stared at it closely and whispered, "Wandering planet." Tanjing's eyes were also attracted by this wandering planet. Wandering planets are not uncommon. In the vast universe, there are many wandering planets and even wandering stars in the gaps between galaxies. Even if it is not surprising to see wandering planets, the wandering planet in front of him is completely different. The whole planet is extremely dark, as if the whole planet is a piece of coal. Li Ming looked at the planet, and then at Tanjing. He was already thinking in his mind, but at this moment, a strange signal suddenly came from the console. Li Ming's eyes turned, and looked at the operating table. He saw a faint light flashing on it, and a piece of information emerged. These information were looming and intermittent. They were not complete sentences, but just some words. "Friendly welcome, come over." A series of simple words were presented in alien characters. The most important thing was that these characters were not unified. It seemed that they were not sent by the civilization of the same galaxy. It felt like receiving English, Chinese, and Spanish at the same time. It was varied and complex. With Li Ming's civilization level, he could naturally recognize a variety of alien characters, but Li Ming rarely found such a varied mixture on a planet. The reason why alien civilizations are advanced is that the first thing they have is the unity of the overall civilization of the planet. It is not like the Earth, where there are multiple countries, and here they must be completely unified. The appearance of multiple civilization characters is obviously abnormal, but the content of these information is very harmonious. Li Ming took a deep breath and said to himself, is there a civilized creature on this wandering planet? Although he was talking to himself, his eyes turned back and forth, looking at the operating table for a while, and then at Tanjing. Her face was full of hesitation. If there were civilized creatures on this planet, it would not be a bad thing for Li Ming. Through them, he could naturally find a way to leave this starfield. Thinking this way in his mind, Li Ming said again, anyway, it is impossible to leave the Bunu starfield for a while, so why not go up and see what's going on? As he spoke, Li Ming pointed at the operating table and decided to enter this planet. Seeing Li Ming raise his hand to operate the spacecraft, Tanjing couldn't help but move, as if he wanted to stop him, but in the end he didn't speak or do anything else. With the operation of his fingers, the spacecraft continued to approach the wandering planet. This planet did not establish a system connection with Li Ming like other planets, as if entering the planet was entirely up to Li Ming, which was different. However, this also made Li Ming cautious, because most civilizations were cautious and resistant to foreign civilizations. They must confirm the purpose, identity, spacecraft and other information before allowing entry, but this planet did not have this information at all. It seemed that people could enter and exit here at will. Arriving at the space of this wandering planet, the spacecraft follows gravity into orbit. At this time, Li Ming can decide the position and location to enter the planet. Looking at the operating table in front of him, he tapped his finger lightly. Through the observation of the spacecraft radar, part of the topography of this planet has appeared on the operating table. The terrain of this planet is pit-shaped, just like a crater, and there are many black spots in each huge pit. Each black spot is deep and huge, like a big well. The pits vary in size. The largest is several kilometers, and the smallest is hundreds of meters. How they are formed is unknown. Li Ming's spacecraft only detected a part of the area, and most of the area cannot be obtained, but there is no sign of civilized creatures in the monitored area. However, this is not surprising. Each civilized creature in the universe has its own way of hiding. For example, the previous UA star, its surface is desolate, but there are other civilizations inside. Through the character information emitted from the planet, Li Ming believes that there are still civilized creatures. After all, those things are not something that wild beasts or Zerg can do. Thinking of this, Li Ming tapped lightly on the operating table and determined the location where he would teleport and land. The destination was determined, and the spacecraft transmission system was activated. After a buzzing sound, it disappeared in the universe with a bang. Above a ruin, Li Ming's spacecraft appeared again with a bang. This location was in the open space between those potholes. From the perspective of space, the gap was not large, but after approaching, it was realized that it was a piece of land that could not be seen at a glance. There was a reason why Li Ming's spacecraft chose this location, because among the many character messages Li Ming received, some of them came from here. At this time, the location of the spacecraft was dozens of meters above the ground. There were various scattered rocks on the ground, some of which were black and huge, and some were very small. Among these rocks, there were sometimes some dilapidated and damaged spacecraft. It looked messy, as if a war had taken place. Li Ming stood on the operating table and scanned the ground situation. His eyes narrowed slightly. After thinking for a moment, he turned around and said, I'll go down and see what's going on. You wait here. At this time, Tanjing's eyes moved slightly, as if she was also thinking about something else, but she didn't say a word, and didn't even look at Li Ming. She just glanced at Li Ming with the corner of her eye. Li Ming, who had just taken a few steps, suddenly paused, stopped again, turned around and looked at Tanjing again. He seemed to see some information with his wise eyes. After being stunned for a while, he said, I'm worried about leaving you here alone. You should go down with me. Hearing this, Tanjing sighed indifferently, turned around and followed Li Ming without saying a word. A blue beam of light shot out from the bottom of the spacecraft. Li Ming and Tanjing slowly fell down together. The beam of light disappeared after they reached the ground. As soon as their feet stepped on the ground, it was like stepping on sand. There were rocks of different sizes everywhere not far away. On this planet, the area that can be seen is limited. It is pitch black all around, but this kind of black is not absolute black. Occasionally, there will be a trace of dim light, which makes the vision less empty. However, to see the terrain in detail, Li Ming needs to use his mental power to see. After looking at the direction, he moved and walked straight over. Tanjing just followed him without saying a word. Stepping on the sand and shuttling among the rocks, Li Ming looked around vigilantly, and his consciousness was also sensing. He seemed to be very careful. However, when he sensed Tanjing beside him, Li Ming smiled lightly and said, "This dark and messy place, a man and a woman alone, feels good. It even reminds me of the time on the mother planet." Li Ming was full of self-talk, but Tanjing's face was expressionless, and he just glanced at Li Ming. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.